Chapter 70. The three of them were startled. This person looked like a guard of the city gate. Why did he stop them without anyone stopping them? We're here to avoid vengeance, Zhu Yao said with a quick mind. Avoid vengeance? This person was the heretic practitioner who guarded the gate. He glanced at the three unfamiliar faces in front of him. What vengeance? Naturally, it's the deity sect. So it's another idiot who offended a deity sect and is here to seek self-protection. The heretic practitioner laughed in disdain. Do you know the password? Password? Zhu Yao was completely dumbfounded. Only a ghost would know what password. Wait a minute, it couldn't be. Open sesame? Roar, roar. Before the guard could reply, Sesame had already jumped out on its own. Its two eyes looked at Zhu Yao excitedly. Mistress, you called me? Zhu Yao. On the contrary, the guard did not seem to be afraid in the slightest. He glanced at Sesame and said with an understanding look, Oh, so you're beast practitioners. With the lousy things you've done, it's no wonder you're being chased by the deity sect. Go on in. Don't waste this old man's time. Thank you, little brother. Although she did not understand why, it was great to be able to enter. Zhu Yao quickly called Sesame back, kept it into the spiritual beast pouch her master made for her, and brought the other two into the city. Zidan explained to her that the so-called beast practitioners were heretic practitioners who used the corpses of spiritual beasts to refine them into corpses that could be controlled and used to attack. However, this art was a little lacking in morals, because the corpses of regular demonic beasts could not be used to refine them. Spiritual beasts that had already been tamed by humans had to be used. However, beast practitioners were not fated with demonic beasts. Because they often refined beast corpses, their bodies carried a scent that demonic beasts especially hated, which would cause demonic beasts to go crazy, let alone tame them. Hence, beast practitioners could only steal other people's spiritual beasts, kill them, and then refine them into puppets. Usually, the puppets that were successfully refined would be a rank higher than the spiritual beasts when they were alive. Killing other people's spiritual beasts and even refining them into puppets to roam around, beast practitioners were definitely heretic practitioners that attracted the most hatred. There was no other. Earlier, Sesame suddenly appeared, and it was even at the 9th rank. That guard must have thought that they were stealing an 8th rank spiritual beast from a deity sect, and even refined it into a puppet, which was why they were being chased by the deity sect. She really had to thank Big Brother Guard for his imagination. He was too timely. Once they entered the city, the three of them tried to find out more information, but evil cultivators were not ordinary people. They were very cautious and would not tell anyone everything. After a whole day, the three of them finally found out the truth. The news that they waited for could be counted on one hand, and not many of them were reliable. Chen Zi was also a beast cultivator. Regardless of whether it was an evil cultivator or a cultivator from an immortal sect, which one of them did not like to raise one or two spiritual beasts? Even her master had raised a group of silly immortal cranes. One could well imagine how much hatred a beast cultivator who specialized in stealing people's spiritual beasts would incite. It was to the extent that whenever they opened their mouths, they would be met with a few supercilious looks or glares. After a whole day, there was no progress. The three of them discussed. He planned to stay for a night. Chanzi had brought so many demonic beasts to attack Ancient Hill Sect. It could be seen that they were all his puppets. There were so many of them. Naturally, the person who lost his spirit beast was also in a similar situation. As long as he asked around, he would be able to find some useful information. The sky was already dark. The three of them found an inn, and after firmly rejecting the fatty Zidan's request to stay together, she returned to her own room. There were some things she needed to sort it out. After setting up a barrier that blocked off probing in the room, she then called out the wood spirit from her divine sense. Wood spirit, do you know where the water spirit is? The 5 spirits each had their own connection, so it should be able to sense the existence of the water spirit. Chick. After the wood spirit woke up, it had already returned to its little potted plant form. Hearing her question, it tilted its head, and then it waved its branches for a while. Chick, 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 chick. She did not understand a single word. All right, there's no need to chick anymore. It seemed like communication was a huge problem. I'll ask, you answer. If it's right, you nod. If it's wrong, you shake your head. When you were in the Great Hall today, did you sense the water spirit from someone else's body? Currently, Xiaoyi was not injured, so naturally, Fengli could not use the water spirit to treat his injuries. That water spirit should still be on Fengli. Although they had no choice in this rescue operation, it was not certain that they would be able to obtain the water spirit. Chick, the wood spirit tilted its head, and then it began to shake violently and even shook off a table of leaves. None? Not a single person in that group? Chick. It continued to shake off the leaves. Then where was the water spirit? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded as well. Wait a minute. Then, did you sense the water spirit today? Chick nodded. She sensed the water spirit, yet it was not on the person in the Great Hall. Could it be? The second day, the sky had just brightened, and the little rescue squad began to work overtime. This time, the three of them went to the most bustling market in the city. This was the first time Zhu Yao had come to a practitioner's market in the cultivation world. Yet, she did not have the heart to stop and stroll around. She focused 120% of her attention and searched for Sovereign Fengyi's whereabouts. In order to better blend in with the crowd, ever since they entered the city, they had concealed their nascent soul cultivation. After all, 3 nascent soul practitioners walking together, and even asking around, would easily attract suspicion. It would be different if they were 3 Azoth practitioners. After asking around, she found out that Chenzi had basically never appeared in Yucang City before. Or to be precise, he did not dare to appear here. She heard that 200 years ago, student Chenzi courted death by stealing a 6th-grade spiritual beast that the city lord had painstakingly subdued, and even refined it into a puppet. Ever since then, he was wanted by the entire city, and he no longer dared to take a step into Yucang City. Zhu Yao was a little discouraged. Yucang City was Chenzi's only shelter. If he did not even dare to come here, then where else would he dare to hide? That's not right. He dared to commit such a huge crime in Ancient Hill Sect, and it was during the promotion ceremony, where the various clans and sects were present. Then, he must have a place that he felt was extremely safe to hide in. And the most dangerous place was usually the safest place. In other words, it was extremely possible that he had concealed his identity and was hiding in Yucang City. When she thought of this point, Zhu Yao was instantly energized. She told her thoughts to the other 2 and changed their target of search. They gave up on Chenzi and instead searched for news about Sovereign Fengyi. Although the information they obtained was not much, it was enough for them to confirm that Fengyi had indeed come to Yucang City before. There was even someone who said that he saw her and a man who was traveling together, heading towards the northwest direction. The 3 of them were overjoyed. Just as they were planning to head towards the northwest direction, suddenly, a commotion broke out on the streets, and the crowd suddenly began to congeal. A scream suddenly sounded in front of them, and the crowd squeezed towards them one after another. Zhu Yao and the 2 others still did not know what happened, when a few more screams sounded in front of them, and they could faintly see a few wisps of black smoke rising. Let's hurry and leave this place. Zidan immediately decided to leave. Zhu Yao and Xiaoyi nodded. They had snuck in the first place. If they were to be discovered, they would be in trouble. Just as the 3 of them turned around, they saw a heretic practitioner who was selling spiritual beast eggs to them earlier, suddenly had his 2 eyes bulging out, and he let out a miserable scream. His eyes, ears, mouth and nose were constantly emitting out thick smoke that was as black as ink. His body was disintegrating at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in an instant, he had already turned into ashes. Not even his bones could be found. Such a terrifying method of killing, forget about Zhu Yao, even Reverend Zidan had never seen it before. However, this was not the end. The same screams continuously sounded in the surroundings, and in an instant, 5 to 6 robust male practitioners had died in the same way on the streets in front of everyone's eyes. Instantly, several terrified voices sounded out from the crowd, and heretic practitioners cherished their lives the most. The streets that were filled with people earlier were instantly filled with those who rode on artifacts, and those who summoned spiritual beasts, one after another, began to flee for their lives. Zhu Yao and the other two exchanged glances and planned to leave as well. What's with the ruckus? Suddenly, a demigod stage pressure came from the sky, and the people who were fleeing in all directions earlier instantly quietened down. A few people who had already flown into the sky lost their balance and instantly fell down. There were even some foundation stage heretic practitioners who did not have high cultivation, who were instantly forced to bleed from the powerful pressure. An extremely beautiful woman suddenly descended from the sky. She was dressed in a very revealing manner, with only a layer of translucent muslin covering her body. Her legs were bare, and the two round lumps on her chest were even more prominent. Her appearance was even more beautiful than Sovereign Fengyi's. Zhu Yao could not help but sigh. This was definitely a stunner that men would not be able to shift their eyes away from once they saw her. Strangely, none of the heretic practitioners present dared to raise their heads. Rather than saying they were respectful, it would be more accurate to say that they were afraid. The entire place was completely silent. What are you bunch of people shouting about so early in the morning for? Disturbing my sweet dreams. The woman glanced at the crowd on the streets. Hearing her question, a tall heretic practitioner at the side hurriedly replied, reporting to the city lord. Earlier, something strange happened in the city. So many people. The woman coldly snorted. With a wave of her hand, the heretic practitioner who replied was suddenly sent flying. He heavily smashed onto the ground a few meters away and puked out a few mouthfuls of blood. The woman then waved her hand again, and that person once again flew back, kneeling in front of her. The woman's slender jade feet heavily stepped on that man's back. With one hand, she lifted the man's chin, narrowed her eyes, and said with a smile, "Why don't you understand the rules? What city lord? Call me queen." Zhu Yao gave a face. So this city lord was actually a queen. The man who replied was evidently heavily injured, yet he still gritted his teeth and replied, "Yes, your majesty." This lowly one did not understand the rules. "I hope that your majesty can forgive me." Zhu Yao gave a face. "Your majesty, did you cross over from an anime?" Amin. Only then did the woman release his chin, turned around, and sat on the man's back. Casually pointing to another person at the side, she said, "Tell me, what's the big deal that happened?" "City, my majesty, there were quite a few people who were strolling around here earlier. They suddenly turned into ashes, and not even their bones remained. Before they disappeared, their bodies were even emitting out black smoke." Black smoke? The woman's expression sank, and suddenly, she revealed a cold smile. "So it's that traitor Qinzi. I didn't even go look for him, yet he actually dared to return. Everyone in the city, listen up." The queen stood up and once again released her pressure. With a cold smile, she said, "Find me a beast practitioner called Qinzi. Who is able to capture him? This queen will heavily reward you." The entire place once again went into an uproar. Everyone's faces were a little excited, looking as though they were itching to give it a try. There were even people who had already impatiently begun to move. Chapter 71. Zhu Yao tugged on Zidan, signaling him to escape amidst the chaos. "Reporting to my king, those 3 people earlier are looking for a beast practitioner called Qinzi as well." A mystic artifact peddler pointed straight at them. "The hell, big bro? What grudge do I have with you?" As expected, in the next moment, the pressure of a demigod directly pressed down on the 3 of them. Zhu Yao did not manage to stand properly and was instantly pressed onto the ground. The other 2 were not any better either, as they half knelt on the ground, cold sweat dripping down. They were merely a large realm apart, but they did not expect the difference in strength to be so great. Forget about resisting, they could not even stand up. "Who are you people? Why are you looking for Qinzi?" In a flash, the woman was already standing in front of them. Her eyes swept across them like a blade and suddenly laughed. "Ha ha ha, so you people are deity practitioners. I never expected that practitioners from a deity sect would actually send themselves to my doorstep." In front of a demigod, the 3's disguises were basically unable to withstand a single blow, and they instantly returned to their original forms. "Men, bring them back." Under the woman's command, a light smoke floated over, instantly turning into 3 men. Each of them wiped out their little rescue squad. Zhu Yao instantly felt like crying. That Chen Zi, he must have destroyed Earth in his previous life. Why did he offend people everywhere? This was the first time Zhu Yao had entered a prison in her life. One of her cellmates was a fatty, while the other had a buff that caused trouble to his teammates. Outside, there was even a perverted queen who could sentence them to death at any time. Little brother, do you have any way to escape? The fatty cellmate squeezed over and looked at her with a constipated expression. Initially, she did have one, if she had brought her master along with her, but the higher-ups of Ancient Hill sect did not give her this chance. No. Zhu Yao sighed and pointed to the prison door. You saw it yourself. Earlier, that female heretic practitioner set up a restriction on the door. The moment it is touched, it will explode. Even if we forcefully charge out, it will alarm that heretic practitioner. What if we use your 9th-rank demonic beast to swallow that door? This way, even if it explodes, there would not be any sound. Zhu Yao continued to shake her head. That demonic beast of mine is too big. Such a small prison cell is basically unable to contain it. Secondly, she had another consideration. Xiaoyi had seen sesame on the door of Taesioluk's secret realm, though back then, it was sealed on the door. She looked a little different from her current appearance, but it was hard to guarantee that he would recognize her after seeing her a few more times. Even so, let's just wait and see. Zidan had initially thought that even if the 3 of them were unable to find Sovereign Feng Yi, they would still be able to deal with the heretic practitioners in this city. However, he didn't expect the city lord to have already broken through to the soul formation stage. Senior Marshal Brother Zidan, looking at you, you seem to know that heretic practitioner earlier. Xiaoyi suddenly asked. Zidan sighed, nodded, and began to explain the whole story. Zhu Yao curiously listened as well. The more she listened, the more she felt that this was simply a melodramatic drama. That city lord was called Rueyu, and was actually Chen Zi's senior and junior brother. He was originally a disciple of the Lily Immortal sect, and his sect was proficient in dual cultivation. However, for some unknown reason, that sect was annihilated. Only the 2 of them were left. Therefore, after all kinds of scenes of mutual dependence, Chen Zi joined the demon sect and became an evil cultivator. Chen Zi became a beast cultivator, but Rueyu was still a proper immortal cultivator. Due to the pig teammate Chen Zhe, various people came knocking on her door to seek revenge. Later on, she even fell in love with someone who did not like her. After being rejected by the other party, in a fit of anger, she went astray. And she went astray in a very unique way. She did not turn into any kind of heretic practitioner. Instead, she modified her own sect's dual cultivation technique. She turned into a heretic art that specialized in absorbing men's vital essence and used the other party's vital essence to raise her cultivation. You guessed correctly. The specific method of operation was to tightly unite with the bed as the center. With 2 or more men as the foundation, it was a harmonious movement that could not be described from the neck down. From then on, Rueyu became a heretic practitioner, and she caught up from behind, and her cultivation actually surpassed Chen Zi. The 2 people who shared the same fate once again approached each other. However, Chen Zi had his eyes on Sovereign Feng Yi of the deity sect. In order to meet Feng Yi, he even thought of ways to enter the deity sect and seek death a few times. Hence, the 2 martial siblings had completely torn each other apart. Speaking of which, Zhu Yao suddenly recalled the strange phenomenon on the streets earlier. Those black smokes were exactly the same as the ones she saw in Ancient Hill sect. It could be seen that those few dead heretic practitioners were done by Chen Zi, and that Rueyu did not even think about it and immediately gave the order to capture Chen Zi because she was extremely familiar with his mystic arts. However, he had clearly already hidden himself, so why did he still take the risk to come out and kill people? Wasn't he afraid of exposing himself? Zhu Yao's heart was filled with a bunch of questions, but what was worth confirming was, Chen Zi was indeed in Yuzhong City. Hurry up, come out. Just as she was pondering, the guard walked over and opened the prison door. Zhu Yao and the other 2 people's mystic arts were sealed, and after many twists and turns, they were brought to a half-closed door. The three of them were forcefully pushed inside, and then the door was closed. Zhu Yao finally stabilized her figure with great difficulty and did not roll into a ball with the two of them. This was a very big, yet very spacious room. White or red light muslin was hung everywhere, and the air was filled with a fishy stench, causing people to feel extremely disgusted. Just why did those guards bring them here? There seems to be someone over there. Xiaoyi pointed to the front. After hesitating for a moment, the guards would not push them in for no reason. Only then did the three of them cautiously walk in. This room was ridiculously big. After walking for a few dozen meters, they could faintly see a human figure moving behind the light muslin in front of them. That fishy stench, however, grew even stronger, and low moans of either joy or pain instantly sounded next to the three people's ears. When they realized what those sounds were, the three people's faces darkened. Big Brother guards sure have a heavy taste. What's the meaning of inviting them to look at a live pornography? Can they get a refund? Zhu Yao turned around, and just as she was about to leave, she was suddenly pulled by an extremely strong suction force and flew in the opposite direction. In an instant, their blood churned, and the three people, who were completely unable to cast any mystic arts to resist, puked out a mouthful of blood. With a kneeling posture, they stopped in front of an extremely large and luxurious bed. And on the bed, the woman who was currently swaying her indescribable body parts with all her might was currently using an indescribable method with another indescribable man in the midst of indescribable sounds, even more so, drilled into the three people's ears. Needless to say, that bold and unrestrained woman was Rueyu. After she cast her mystic arts in front of the bed, she no longer cared about them and focused on the indescribable man on the bed. Only after Zhu Yao took a closer look did she realize that there was actually not just one man on the bed, but four. Every single one of them was looking at Rueyu with an infatuated expression, and the four of them had a very clear division of labor. Each of them was responsible for an indescribable part on Rueyu's body. This scene was so alluring that even Zhu Yao, who had watched various movies in the modern era, was dumbfounded. It was no wonder she wanted others to call her queen. If she were to bring out a whip and candles, she would definitely be a queen. The person on the bed was performing very attentively, and the audience below were also vomiting blood very attentively as well. Mama's egg, even if they did not sell tickets, there was no need for them to constantly release pressure to suppress them, right? And they were even loosening and tightening at times, creating manual 3D special effects. 2 hours later, a certain VHS movie Queen's performance, which included acting, sound effects, and 3D special effects, finally came to an end. And the four men on the bed who were initially robust and handsome were visibly thinning out at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye, as though they only had a single breath left. Rueyu kicked away the man who was still holding onto her round buttocks, picked up a light muslin at the side of the bed, and stood up. Taking advantage of the situation, she slid out the indescribable part of the man below her. The three of you, just because you're nascent soul practitioners, you dare to enter my Yutsong city. Are all the people in the deity sect as stupid as you three? Rueyu's voice carried a hint of laziness. Putting on the light muslin, she walked over barefooted. Stopping in front of Zhu Yao, she bent down and pinched her chin and said with a smile, "Aren't you pretty?" The hell? She had been watching the show for too long earlier and had forgotten that she was currently a man as well. Rueyu smiled, and then her eyes instantly turned cold. She forcefully slapped Zhu Yao's face. This queen hates good-looking men the most. This pervert. Not only did she have a problem with her morals, her life was in danger as well. This slap, which clearly carried spiritual energy, had instantly slapped Zhu Yao's face askew. Her chin was instantly dislocated, and it was so painful that tears even began to flow out. If you don't like good-looking men, then say so earlier. Why did she have to vent her anger on her face? She was bullying her for not being born from a mother. Rueyu vented her anger, and then walked towards Xiao Yi at the side. Similarly, she raised his head, and her smile became even colder. "You're not bad either." Raising her hand, and just as her slap was about to land on his face, Have you always used ruthlessness to disguise yourself? What did you say? Rue Yu's slap unexpectedly stopped next to Xiao Yi's ears. Xiao Yi sighed, however. He looked at her with a pitiful gaze. Isn't that so? Hating men is just a deliberate disguise of yours. Disguise? This is a disguise as well? Rue Yu coldly laughed. Turning around, with a wave of her hand, the four lifeless and skinny men on the bed instantly turned into ashes. Her expression grew even colder as she ruthlessly stared at Xiao Yi. Good-looking men all deserve to die. Xiao Yi, however, let out an even deeper sigh and looked at her even more pitifully. You're simply hurt very deeply. Slaughter is not your true nature. Rue Yu was speechless, as though she was shocked by his words. For a moment, she did not know how to react. Her hands clenched and then loosened. After repeating this a few times, she finally let out a heavy, cold laugh. Rue Yu turned around and sat back on the bed, staring straight at Xiao Yi. Humph, you're a little interesting as a man. The situation changed too quickly, and Zhu Yao was a little unable to keep up with it. It was as though she could faintly hear a voice resounding next to her ears. Conquering Rue Yu is a success. Xiao Yi has obtained a girl X1. The hell? This works too. Stud Halo blinds the world. I do want to hear, what is my true nature? Guards. The guard at the door pushed open the door and walked in. Bring those two people back to the prison. Without saying a word, the guard picked up the two light bulbs, Zhu Yao and Zidan. Zidan thought that the queen was going to harm Xiao Yi and wanted to resist. Zhu Yao silently gave him its okay expression, and the two of them were thrown back into the prison by the guard. Chapter 72. Zhu Yao had never been so thankful for Xiao Yi's protagonist Halo. Looking at the queen's reaction earlier, there was no longer any problem with his life, and he might even be able to help his teammates. To be able to fool even a demigod-stage female practitioner, as expected, Xiao Yi was using his life to pick up girls. The world was changing too quickly. She really wanted to chew on a packet of spicy gluten to calm down, if only her lower jaw was fine. In the next 2 days, Zhu Yao and Zidan's lives were especially peaceful. No more guards brought them out to watch the live version of VHS movies. It was actually very painful, but her lower jaw was successfully reattached. Just when they thought they were about to be forgotten by the queen made a high-profile appearance. This time, she did not wear those see-through light muslin, but ordinary clothes. Although it was still very flirtatious, at least she wore shoes. The queen coldly looked at the two people in the prison and lazily said, "Initially, I wanted to kill you two to avoid being an eyesore, but he said you two are his senior martial brothers. Although I hate senior martial brothers the most, I promised him to let you two go, so I'll give you two a chance to live." Rue Yu waved her hand, and the restriction on the door was removed. "Why aren't you coming out?" Seeing them walk out, Rue Yu cast an art, and the sealed mystic energy instantly began to circulate again. Zhu Yao's first reaction was to cast a recovery mystic art on her lower jaw, to ease the pain from the forced reattachment of her lower jaw. Rue Yu cast a disdainful look at her action. A grown man was actually afraid of such a small pain. Zhu Yao curled her lips without minding it. She had experienced even more painful things, but she could not endure the pain for 2 days. "Let's go. He wants to see you too." Rue Yu once again glared at her, turned around, and walked out. Among the three, only Zidan still had a blank look. Zhu Yao, however, knew that the person they wanted to see was definitely Xiao Yi. They arrived at a garden, and Xiao Yi was standing by the side of a pond with his immaculate clothes. "Senior martial brothers." Xiao Yi walked over. Rue Yu, however, welcomed him, and immediately held onto Xiao Yi's hand, as she looked at the two people in front of her provocatively. "Junior martial brother Xiao. You're..." Zidan frowned and looked at the two people back and forth. His expression was filled with disapproval. Could it be that junior martial brother Xiao was going to associate with heretic practitioners? A hint of uneasiness flashed past Xiao Yi's face as he explained the course of events to the two of them. However, the content of the story was how pitiful Rue Yu's life was. She had no choice but to become an evil cultivator. After his advice, she had repented. He hoped that everyone could put down their prejudices and forgive her. Zhu Yao was shocked. So he wasn't acting earlier. The words that Xiao Yi said in that room were all from the bottom of his heart. It was not a sudden impulse or a sudden inspiration. In other words, he truly pitied this evil cultivator who specialized in sucking men's essence from the bottom of his heart. Zidan was dumbstruck as well, and when he finished listening, his face had already turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. Although Zidan was an optimistic fatty who usually did not have a temper and was easy to talk to, he was, after all, a mountain lord and the core strength of ancient hill sect. They grew up under the red flag and took root in the immortal sect. When Xiao Yi said this, he was definitely going to betray the immortal sect. Zidan's complexion turned from black to purple, and on his chubby hands, even the veins were about to pop out. Just as he was about to charge forward and fight, Zhu Yao grabbed onto him. "Senior Marshal Brother, don't forget the reason why we're here." Zidan glanced at her, and only then did he suppress the raging storm in his eyes. Turning his head, he no longer looked at Xiao Yi. Seeing that the two of them did not resist, Rueyu coldly snorted. At least you two know your place." The veins on Zidan's hands once again popped out. Zhu Yao, however, had long gotten used to it. Ever since Xiao Yi was 10, she knew that there was a problem with this child's worldview. However, when he said such words, she was indeed a little shocked as well. No matter how pitiful Rueyu's life was, no matter how forced she was, it was a fact that she used men's essence to cultivate. Now that she had risen to a demigod, who knew how many white bones had been accumulated behind her? How could a single "I had no choice" negate it? Her life was pitiful, but in this world, there were as many pitiful lives as the hairs on a cow. If everyone was like her, then what would this world become? There was a good saying, life was given by the heavens, but the road was walked by oneself. Some people lived in heaven, yet they could walk the devil's path. Some people lived in hell, yet they could still live the splendor of heaven. The decision had always been in one's own hands, and all of the involuntary actions were actually excuses to fall into depravity. "We'll discuss this matter in the future," Zhu Yao said. "Have you found a way to save your master?" She did not care about picking up girls, as long as he still remembered his own master. Xiao Yi was startled for a moment, and only then did he realize that he had actually placed Rueyu's matter in the first place, and had forgotten about his own master. A hint of guilt surfaced on his face before he replied. "Yucang City's territory is too vast. I'm afraid, regarding the search, we have to think about it at length." "There's no need to think about it at length." Zhu Yao waved her hand. "We don't have that much time. I have a method that we can try." There were too many people in Yucang City. She did not know how long it would take for them to investigate one by one, and since Chanzi dared to enter, he definitely had a way to not be discovered. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so fearless as to kill people in the city. Zhu Yao's method was very simple. Although the number of people could not be too few, it would be fine if she just sent people out. Of course, not everyone could leave the city, but all heretic practitioners with wood spirit veins. Feng Yi possessed the wood attribute Heavenly Spirit Vein, so her body would definitely be filled with spiritual energy. Under the situation where there were no wood spirit veins in the entire city, she would have the wood spirit sense where the wood spiritual energy was the densest, and Feng Yi would be there. Of course, she could not tell them that she possessed the wood spirit, so the person who would sense it would be her, who possessed the wood attribute Heavenly Spirit Vein as well. This was also the best method she could think of in these 2 days. When Zhu Yao finished speaking, Xiao Yi and Ziling felt that this method was feasible as well. Although Rueyu was a little unwilling, looking at Xiao Yi's face, she still issued a city lord's order, ordering all the people in the city who possessed the wood attribute spirit vein to leave the city, and they were not allowed to enter for the next 3 days. In just a morning, there was not a single heretic practitioner with the wood spirit vein left in Yucang City. Zhu Yao sat in a lotus position and looked as though she was sensing the wood's spiritual energy, but in reality, she was probing deep into her divine sense. Would spirit sense it again? How many places in the city have wood spiritual energy? Chick. The wood spirit tilted its head, pondered for a moment, and then obediently stretched out a vine. Chick. This was the transportation method they had agreed on earlier. One vine mint one. Very good. Now, tell me, which direction is it in? Chick. The vine quickly turned into an arrow and pointed towards the left direction. That was the west. Good job. Zhu Yao praised it. Only then did she open her eyes and inform her teammates who were waiting for news. It's in the west. Xiao Yi and Ziling exchanged glances. One summoned his spiritual artifact, while the other summoned his spiritual beast and walked out of the door. Naturally, Zhu Yao followed them as well and flew towards the west of the city. Zhu Yao communicated with the wood spirit while pointing the way. As he pointed the way, they soon arrived at a dilapidated house. This place should be the most secluded place in the city, as there was not a single person in the surroundings. It was an ordinary house with 2 rooms, and it was completely empty inside. This is the place you sensed. Rue you had unknowingly followed over and looked at her with a cold smile. Xiaoyi frowned. Why did you follow me here? Rue you glanced at him coquettishly. Because I was worried about you. Xiao Yi did not reply. Looking at his expression, he seemed to be enjoying it a little. Zhu Yao silently rolled her eyes. Pulling Ziling, who was about to explode, she took a step back. After all, Xiaoyi had saved them. No matter how he did not reject anyone, it was not their turn to speak. I have indeed sensed a very dense wood spiritual energy in this direction. The little wood spirit basically did not develop any deceptive abilities, so naturally, it would not be wrong for it to point in this direction. Ziling scratched his head and was a little anxious. Little brother. Everything could be seen at a glance, not to mention the inside of the house. Not to mention the inside of this house. There isn't a single person in the surrounding few kilometers. Zhu Yao once again entered the house to take a look. Immediately after, she went to the other house to take a look. Don't you guys feel that? Zhu Yao pointed to this house. There's a little problem with the structure of these 2 houses. Each of the 2 houses was not even 15 square meters. However, the area occupied by this house was close to 40 square meters. Excluding the public stalls, at least 5 square meters of space was missing. You're saying? Ziling's eyes shone. Exchanging glances with Xiao Yi, they reacted at the same time. Together, they flew to the roof and lifted a large piece of roof tile in the middle. Both of their faces were filled with joy at the same time. There's another room in the middle. Rue Yu retracted her mocking and ridiculing expression as well. With a wave of her hand, she summoned a huge gust of wind and instantly lifted the entire roof. Together with the 2 people on the roof, they jumped into the room in the middle that did not have a door. Zhu Yao flew in as well. Little brother, you're really something, to actually be able to discover something like this. Ziling patted on her shoulders and praised. Zhu Yao jolted from the pad of his big fat paw and immediately stood a little further away. Could she say that she had seen this through her experience of looking at houses in the modern era? It was not easy to buy a house in the modern era, and there were even black-hearted developers who would frequently cut down on the size of the house. She had all of this through training. What's the use of discovering a dark room? Rue Yu continued to use her mocking technique. Isn't it still empty? Zhu Yao sized up her surroundings. Indeed, this was still an empty room. Compared to the dilapidated room outside, other than being filled with dust, this room was not even dilapidated. It was as though no one had entered it before. She walked 1 round around the corner of the room and did not discover anything. However, she faintly felt that the floor was a little slippery. Sweeping away the dust to take a look, she saw that the floor was actually paved with stone slabs, and there were even some carvings on it. There's something on the floor. When Rue Yu heard that, she immediately formed hand seals with both of her hands and released a large area of wind-type mystic energy. In an instant, the surrounding winds blew violently, and the walls were instantly blown away as well. When it stopped, the perfectly good 3-room house only had a piece of floorboard left. What kind of grudge do you have with houses? Have you ever considered the feelings of someone who would not be able to earn a single set in his entire life? What's this carving? Xiaoyi asked. The moment the dust was blown away, the things carved on the floor were revealed. There were a total of 9 carvings, and they were arranged neatly. The patterns on them were all different. They were not any kind of symbols or imprints. nor were they formations. Furthermore, they had never been seen before. Rueyu, Zidan, and Xiaoyi stared at them for a moment. Yet, not a single one of them could see what was carved on the floor. Chapter 73. Little brother, have you seen these diagrams before? Zidan asked. Zhu Yao shook her head. These carvings were all over the place. It would be strange if she could recognize them. There seems to be a piece missing here. Xiaoyi walked to the right side of the 9 diagrams, and as expected, there was a concave area, as though it was dug out by someone. Xiaoyi reached out his hand to touch it, and suddenly, the empty space emitted out a silver light. It's actually glowing here. The 3 of them were dumbfounded. Zhu Yao looked at the glowing square empty space, and then, she suddenly turned her head to look at the other 9 diagrams at the side. Something that was cut off in her mind suddenly connected with a ding. The hell? This was actually a puzzle. No wonder she felt that the diagram was all over the place. It was actually messed up. Make way. Zhu Yao pushed Xiaoyi, who was next to the empty space. This should be a game mechanism. Zhu Yao almost said that it was a game. She squatted down, pressed on the piece next to the empty space, and pulled it out. Without using much strength, that diagram automatically moved towards the empty space, and the place where the diagram was originally, once again lit up with a silver-white light. Zhu Yao looked at the other 8 stone slabs, and then began to focus on the puzzle. In less than 10 minutes, a complete diagram was completed. Zhu Yao moved the last piece of the puzzle to its original position, and the light on the empty space finally stopped lighting up. However, the ground began to shake, and the complete puzzle suddenly emitted out a red, formation-like radiance, and there were even characters that she did not recognize floating on it. It's done. Zidan looked at Zhu Yao with a surprised look. Little brother, I never expected that you're actually proficient in mechanisms and formations from the ancient era, this retarded game, and you call it the ancient era? Zhu Yao replied with a smile. Ho ho, I know a little. Could she say that she had been playing this since she was 3 years old? This is a teleportation formation. Xiaoyi took a step forward in shock. Master must be on the other side of the formation. After saying that, he was the first to walk in. Rueyu pouted. A hint of dissatisfaction surfaced on her face. Yet, she still followed him in. Zidan nodded towards Zhu Yao, and then walked towards the center of the formation. The red light instantly brightened, and the scenery in front of them was completely covered by the red light. A moment later, it slowly dimmed down. Looking around, they had already arrived at an unfamiliar place. It was dark all around, and they could faintly see the broken rocks and broken walls in front of them. It was lonely and quiet all around, so quiet that it was a little strange. Zhu Yao summoned a wisp of flame. The surroundings instantly became clear. There was a city in front of them, but it was a deserted city of the dead. Looking at the style of the house, it should be very old. Moreover, there were all sorts of strange runes engraved on the walls, somewhat similar to the characters on the walls of Yucang. Could this be the underground city? Rueyu mumbled. So there really is an underground city in Yucang City? Hearing this, the other 3 were stunned. The underground city was actually a legend. According to legend, Yucang City was the location of an ancient immortal cultivation sect. The sect was proficient in ancient secret arts, especially formations. Later on, the sect declined. At the moment of annihilation, the surviving disciples worked together to bury a portion of the sect into the ground to avoid being hunted down by their enemies. But after so many years, many people had dug deep into Yucang City, but no one had found this city. After a long time, they all thought that this legend was a lie. This legend, Zidan had mentioned it to Zhu Yao as well. Thinking about it, it was understandable. How could a city hidden by an immortal cultivation sect that was famous for its secret arts and formations be found so easily? However, the entrance to the underground city was actually a jigsaw puzzle. This was too casual, wasn't it? Zhu Yao gave a face. Little brother, can you sense the direction of the wood spiritual energy? Zidan asked. Zhu Yao closed her eyes. A moment later, she opened them and shook her head. The little wood spirit had waited for too long. It actually fell asleep. This was too unreliable. There's that black smoke here as well. Xiaoyi's expression suddenly turned cold. He pointed to the wisp of black smoke not far in front of them. It seems like that evil thief is indeed hiding here. Zidan shook the fats on his body. Let's search for the source of the black smoke. Zhu Yao increased her speed and chased after the crowd. The black smoke was getting thicker as well. She could even faintly smell an unpleasant stench, as though it was some sort of rotting problem. The few of them walked further and further away from the underground city, arriving at a passageway. The road was getting narrower as well. A few minutes later, the black smoke in front of them was so thick that they could no longer see the direction. Practitioners had strong senses in the first place, so Zhu Yao could not help but feel disgusted. She hurriedly sealed off a portion of her sense of smell, and only then did she feel a little better. Little brother, be careful. Zhu Yao was currently walking forward numbly, when suddenly, she was pulled 2 steps back by Zidan. When she took a closer look, it was actually a gigantic pit in front of her. The size of the pit was simply more than 4 to 5 football fields. And within the pit, black smoke was endlessly emitting out, and below the thick smoke was a pool of black water. It was bubbling like lava from a volcano, and there were even blood clots of various sizes floating in the water. When she took a closer look, they were actually all rotting or half-rotting demonic beast corpses. Zhu Yao was so frightened that she took 2 steps back. Fortunately, Zidan pulled her back. Patting on her chest, she calmed herself down, and just happened to see Rueyu's cold smile. Zhu Yao's heart turned cold. Earlier, the one who was walking in front of her was coincidentally Rueyu. Yet, the one who pulled her back was Zidan. She clearly knew there was a pit here, yet, she did not warn her. She did it on purpose. This queen was up to no good. This must be a place to refine demonic beast puppets, Zidan analyzed. Turning around, he brought the crowd into a small path. Chunzi isn't here. It seems like we can only split up and search. The 4 of them discussed and decided to split into 2 groups and search separately. Xiao Yi and Rueyu would return to the underground city to search, while Zhu Yao and Zidan would continue to head deeper into the cave. Zhu Yao had no choice but to walk towards this narrow path. The path was still filled with black smoke, so Zhu Yao had no choice but to release her divine sense and carefully explore the path. The strange thing was, this path was unexpectedly long. Even with her nascent soul-stage divine sense, she was not able to explore to the end, and the deeper she went, the darker it became. Zhu Yao held onto a ball of fire and walked for 2 hours in the path, yet she still could not see the end. Finally, she realized something was wrong and pulled the person in front of her. Senior Marshal Brother, do you feel that we've been going in circles? Zidan was startled. But earlier, I intentionally left a strand of spiritual energy at the places we walked past. I didn't sense any similar spiritual energy ripples. Although Zidan was fat, he was never muddle-headed when it came to official matters. However, Zhu Yao was muddle-headed. This was already the 3rd time she stepped on a piece of slippery rock, and she had almost sprained her ankle. And every time she sprained her ankle, the feeling was the same. She could guarantee with her integrity that it was definitely the same piece. Senior Marshal Brother, try releasing a little more spiritual energy. It was not a solution to continue walking like this. Zidan nodded and released a strand of spiritual energy as he was told. The 2 of them did not continue to move and simply stood on the spot. A few minutes later, Zidan's eyes suddenly widened. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. The spiritual energy is gone? That strand of spiritual energy actually disappeared without a trace. The spiritual energy mark released by a mighty nascent soul stage practitioner actually disappeared so strangely. As expected, they were walking in circles on the spot. Zhu Yao enlarged the fireball in her hand a little, causing her surroundings to become even clearer. The first thing she did was to kick away the rock beneath her feet. She then carefully inspected this strange path. There's a rune engraved on it. Zidan pointed to the stone wall on the right side of the path. Zhu Yao took a closer look, and it was once again those strange words on the city walls. She was completely unable to understand them. Zhu Yao reached out her hand to wipe away some of the dust, wanting to take a closer look. That rune suddenly let out a flash of light, and she instantly felt her hand turning numb. As though she had been electrocuted, The fireball on her other hand, which was used to illuminate the path, instantly extinguished as well. This stone wall can absorb spiritual energy. Zhu Yao immediately retracted her hand. Zidan cast a clear wind art and immediately headed towards the entire path. The path, which was filled with dust earlier, was instantly blown clean. On the stone walls on both sides, the same type of rune was actually engraved densely. It seems as long as one uses mystic arts and comes into contact with the rune, their spiritual energy will be sucked away. Zidan pointed to the front and said, "Let's walk again. Let's see if there's anything strange." Zhu Yao nodded. Being trapped here forever was not a solution either. She still had to find a way out. As expected, after the two of them walked for a short while, they realized an anomaly. The paths were all built with identical rectangular yellowish-brown rocks, but the one on the stone wall in front of them was a cube, and it was even blue, making it especially eye-catching. Wasn't this clearly telling others that the exit was here? For a moment, Zhu Yao was a little worried for the intelligence of the person who built the path. She couldn't be colorblind, right? Zidan pressed on that blue rock and circulated his spiritual energy. As expected, it was not absorbed. The blue rock suddenly trembled a few times, and the runes on the surrounding yellowish-brown rocks instantly began to move as though they were alive. They formed the pattern of a formation on the entire wall, and they emitted out a red glow. So there's another path here. Zidan glanced at Zhu Yao. "Little brother, you're more familiar with formations. Why don't you walk in front?" Zhu Yao gave a helpless look. "How did you see that I'm familiar with it?" However, walking in front was good as well. With such a huge lump of him walking in front, it would really block her line of sight. Hence, without any objections, she immediately passed through the formation wall. Behind the formation was yet another path, and it was of the same type as before. Zhu Yao instantly felt very tired. Why did she feel as though she was walking in a maze? Summoning a fireball to illuminate the path, Zhu Yao released her divine sense to its fullest. Resigned to her fate, she continued to explore the path, especially splitting her attention to observe the differences in the surrounding walls. However, she no longer found those square-shaped rocks. The only change was, the path became narrower the further she walked. Walking towards the end, even she had to lower her head as she walked, let alone Zidan, whose body was growing horizontally. He was about to curl himself up into a ball. An hour later, she finally reached the end. It was a wall, and 3 patterns were carved on it. One was in the shape of a phoenix, one was in the shape of a dragon, and the last one was in the shape of a tortoise. The positions of these 3 patterns were very loose, as though they were randomly carved on it. "Little brother, what kind of mechanism formation is this?" Zidan curiously asked. "I don't know either. There were only 3 patterns, so how would she know which game it was?" There's a stone box here." Zhu Yao turned around to take a look, and as expected, there was a rectangular stone box beneath her feet. Sweeping it with her divine sense, she did not find any traces of a formation. When she opened it, she saw that the entire box was filled with carvings that looked like small tiles. Their sizes and appearances were the same as the ones on the stone wall. However, there was an additional tiger-shaped one. The line in Zhu Yao's mind once again connected with a ding sound. "If I call you Gamoku, do you dare to accept?" Chapter 74. The person who designed this mechanism must be a primary school student. "Do you dare to make a combo at the back? Brother, do you have a clue?" Zhu Yao nodded, feeling like crying. She did not want to play this kind of retarded game at all. "All right?" He let out a long sigh, resigned to his fate, and pasted the tiles on the wall one by one. Actually, it wasn't right to call it Gamoku, because it was a single-player game that was even less intelligent than Gamoku. The rules were very simple. There were 9 squares and 4 types of pictures. As long as the 4 pictures were looked at horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, it would be fine. As for the intelligence requirement, elementary school level, Zhu Yao spent 10 seconds to complete it. With a tired heart, she looked at the red light that once again lit up on the wall. This time, it was not a teleportation array formation. The entire wall seemed to have broken down into many small cubes, which then parted to the sides, directly revealing the path behind. "Let's hurry over." Zhu Yao was the first to make her way over. After taking 2 steps, she realized that there was no movement behind her. When she turned around, she realized that a gigantic meatball was currently stuck on the wall, and it was currently trying its best to squeeze its entire body of fat towards her like squeezing toothpaste. Zhu Yao. Ho ho, little brother. I'm stuck again. Zidan looked at her apologetically and desperately tried to squeeze in. What a tiring fatty. Zhu Yao stepped forward to help pull him out, only to realize that she was basically unable to move him at all. You don't need to use teleportation to enter? Zhu Yao suggested. Zidan nodded. With a single hand, she formed a hand seal. After a while, she shook her head. This won't do. This wall can absorb spiritual energy. Right now, I'm stuck here. Before the hand seal can form, my spiritual energy will disperse first. Damn it, this passage was actually racist. Fatty wasn't human. Little brother, you should go in first. I think the end of this passage should be right in front. Zidan said, go ahead by yourself and see if the sovereign is there. If he's not here, you can come back to help me. Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment before accepting his suggestion. Though he was stuck here and did not have the strength to resist, however, this passage could only absorb spiritual energy, so it was unable to unleash any spells that were too powerful. Zirua was a nascent soul paragon cultivator. Normal attacks wouldn't be able to hurt him. Zhu Yao continued to walk towards the end alone. Zidan was right. The end of this passageway was right in front. Her divine sense had already detected that there was no way forward. In less than the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, she arrived at the end. This was another empty room. It was so clean that there were no furnishings in it. Not even a speck of dust could be seen. Zhu Yao was a little disappointed. She had been tossing and turning for half a day, yet there was nothing at all. In an instant, he felt as though he had been played. He let out a long sigh. Just as he was about to turn around to save Fatty, the ground cracked open, and a hole several meters long appeared. Zhu Yao's reaction was extremely fast, as she flew on her flying sword. Before she could heave a sigh of relief, suddenly, there was a huge suction force, and she was still sucked down. Fuck, you can't do that. Zhu Yao descended the entire time. Not long after, with a splat, he fell flat on his back. My old waist. You don't need to waste your efforts. I will definitely not agree to it. A voice as cold as a lotus entered his ears. Fengyi, Mommy, I finally found this high mountain flower. The woman who was meditating in the middle opened her eyes. A trace of astonishment flashed across her cold face. You're courting death. Zhu Yao rubbed her aching waist. My name is Jiangyu. The sect leader told me to call you home for dinner. Apui. He told me to save you. She was used to saying it. You're the new elder of Beast Taming Mountain. Fengyi asked. Zhu Yao nodded and hurriedly expressed her gratitude. You're just wasting your efforts by coming here. Fengyi evidently did not know what to say. Forget about being grateful. She did not even look over. She really hated this pair of master and disciple. What should she do? Since I was able to find this place, how is it wasting my efforts? Speak clearly, hey. If I knew you didn't want to be saved, I definitely wouldn't have come. I say you. Sovereign, let's pack up and hurry and leave. Fatty was still stuck there. Fengyi frowned, as though she was dissatisfied with her casual tone. Do you think it's that easy to enter and exit this place? She coldly glanced at him. Putting aside the fact that this path is filled with mechanisms and formations, if one isn't skilled in this field, it would be hard to move even an inch. Mechanisms and formations? Was she talking about those puzzles and Gamoku games? Don't look down on her intelligence, hey. After all, she graduated from university. Not to mention that the surrounding talismans can absorb spiritual energy, they basically can't attack. Furthermore, Fengyi's prideful gaze swept past her, and then, she looked at the position behind her. Even the ancient formation on the door is complicated, and it's impossible to penetrate. Zhu Yao turned to look at the so-called ancient formation, and the corner of her lips twitched. Fengyi once again closed her eyes, as though she was mocking her for overestimating herself. Every time Chenzi enters, that formation will change. I have used the 5 elemental soldier arts and the essentials of formations, yet, I'm still unable to penetrate it. Unless you know the ancient secret art, you basically can't leave. Zhu Yao sighed. I really do know it. What? Phony fiercely opened her eyes. Zhu Yao stared at the door in front of her with a helpless expression and suddenly had the urge to scratch the door. Who doesn't know the 9-square grid? Formations with single-digit addition and subtraction. I'll spray salty soda on your face. You really know how to solve this ancient art? The tall mountain flower was finally willing to look her in the eye, though her expression was still filled with doubt. Zhu Yao rarely bothered with her. Walking to the front of the 9-square grid, she began to research the answer. The 9-square grid could be considered as a relatively simple number game. In the 9-square grid, one could fill in the numbers from 1 to 9. As long as the 3 numbers on the vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines add up to 15, it would be considered complete. Usually, 3 or so numbers would be filled in the grid as a hint. As a game planner, she would often design these kinds of small games in her games to act as checkpoints. Hints in front of her. A mere 9-square grid did not pose any pressure at all. She seemed to know what the answer was the moment she glanced at it. Zhu Yao circulated her spiritual energy and wrote the missing numbers on it. Feng Yi walked over as well. Looking at her serious look, she really believed that she knew how to open this door. When Zhu Yao finished writing the last number, the door did not have any reaction at all. Strange, why wasn't it moving? Could it be that she had to push it? She had no choice but to push the door again, but it still did not budge. Ugh, how embarrassing. That's not right. The answer isn't wrong. Zhu Yao did not understand either. Feng Yi sighed and shook her head. The expression she was looking at her with became even more indifferent. Evidently, she was regretting that she actually believed in him. Turning around, she planned to sit back down. Zhu Yao carefully stared at the words on the door again and finally realized what was wrong. These words, why are they written so strangely? Zhu Yao touched the words and muttered. The words she wrote were completely different from the 3 words that were originally left on the grid. Could it be that this 9-square grid was able to recognize handwriting? It was so high-end. Those are runes, Feng Yi coldly replied. Runes that contain mystical energy are required to create runes when creating talismans. He did not even know about runes, and he even said that he could break this ancient art? Zhu Yao's eyes shone. In other words, he was not recognizing handwriting, but the words. Say so earlier. She changed the words, that's not right. She seemed to have never learned how to create talismans. Venerable one, could you please change the numbers I wrote into runes? Only when it was time to use them would one regret not having enough knowledge. Feng Yi frowned. She really did not want to bother with this arrogant junior. If not for the fact that he was here to save her, and that this place only allowed entry and not exits, she would have long chased this unreasonable person out of here. Feng Yi waved her hand, and a gust of wind swept past. The few Chinese characters that Zhu Yao wrote earlier slowly twisted and changed. Although they were still the original numbers, they had an additional feeling of elegance. Seemingly after the final number changed, the entire door let out a kacha sound. The 4 sides of the door shone with a white light, and then the door rumbled as it opened to the 2 sides. Zhu Yao was speechless. As expected, it was a 9-square grid that could be done even with her eyes closed. Feng Yi looked at the youth who was a little dazed. Zhu Yao was already used to this kind of shock. Actually, it was not because these mechanisms were difficult, nor was it because they did not know how to solve these mechanisms. Rather, they were used to relying on formations and talisman arts, and had thought of simple matters as too complicated. Let's go. Zhu Yao waved to the back. It's best if we leave as soon as possible. It won't be good if we're discovered. Feng Yi slowly stood up and looked at her with an indecipherable expression. However, she still followed after them. Maybe he was just lucky. There were simply too many ancient secret arts in this underground city. How could a single person be able to solve all of them? However, in the next moment, this youth in front of her whom Feng Yi looked down on had toppled her understanding. As one mechanism after another was opened, the originally difficult and complicated path of mechanisms was now smooth and unobstructed. Her expression had also changed from the initial contempt to an increasingly shocked one. You, how did you find out about the method to solve them? Could he be the successor of that ancient sect that disappeared? You want to learn? Zhu Yao turned to glance at her and casually replied, "It's fine. I can teach you." She was a mighty demigod practitioner. Why would she covet? Don't worry, this is actually rather simple. A childish game like the 9-square grid could be solved even with her eyes closed. But we have to wait until we get out. We have to return and save Fatty first. Zhu Yao added. So Zhu Yao really wanted to teach her. Feng Yi's expression instantly changed, and she could no longer find the high mountain flower from earlier. Along the way, Zhu Yao solved 4 to 5 9-square grids. She was even beginning to suspect if there were other transmigrators who had come to this world before. Otherwise, why would there be so many familiar checkpoints? Finally, they returned to the empty room from before. Probably because they had solved the mechanisms. The ground which was initially cracked open had once again returned to its original state, and it was impossible to tell that there was once a huge hole. In order to avoid the tragedy from before, this time, Zhu Yao lay on the surrounding walls, and like a crab, she moved horizontally towards the opposite passage. Feng Yi, who was following behind, was unclear of the situation, and thought that this was another type of mechanism. She silently followed behind and began to move horizontally. Zhu Yao, who had accidentally tricked this goddess. Chapter 75. Honestly speaking, seeing the flower of the high mountain pass by the wall with the posture of a crab, this scene was unexpectedly rather satisfying. Coo. Fatty is right in front. Zhu Yao faked a few coughs, desperately trying to hold back her wild laughter that was about to be exposed. Pretending to be anxious, she sprinted towards the Fatty, and when she saw Zidan, who was still stuck in the middle of the wall, she finally could not help but hit the ground and laugh out wildly. Ha 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 ha. It seemed like in this lifetime, whenever she meets Feng Yi, she would think of the crab goddess. Feng Yi was startled, glancing at Zidan, who was in a dilemma. As though she had found the reason for her loss of composure, her cold face could not help but raise the corner of her lips. Little brother, stop teasing me. Zidan, who was still stuck in the wall, similarly thought that he was the main character, and a little embarrassment surfaced on his face. I have already been stuck for almost 2 hours. Hurry and push your big brother out. This was truly a beautiful misunderstanding. Just you wait. Ha 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 ha. What should she do? She simply could not stop. Feng Yi shook her head. Immediately raising her hand, she circulated her spiritual energy, and with a palm strike, she instantly sent Zidan, who was stuck in the wall, flying. After rolling twice, he finally stopped. Fatty Zidan crawled up unscathed. Patting the dust on his body, he cupped his hands and bowed. Thank you, Senior Martial Ant. Amen, Feng Yi nodded, as a reply. Zhu Yao finally had enough of laughing. Let's go. She wondered how Xiaoyi was doing. They did not encounter Chen Zi, but it did not mean that he had the same luck. Wait a minute. Feng Yi suddenly frowned. A look of disgust flashed past her face. Someone is currently heading this way. It's Chen Zi. Perfect timing. Zidan coldly snorted. Just when he was worried about not being able to find him, he had walked right into their trap. Senior Martial Brother. Zhu Yao pulled him. After all, this is his territory. It's best if we don't directly clash with him. Earlier, quite a lot of your spiritual energy was absorbed by that stone wall, and right now, you might not be his opponent either. Furthermore, Sovereign is injured as well. Zidan turned to look at Feng Yi and nodded. Nodding his head, their mission was to save Sovereign Feng Yi, and this place was not suitable to treat Sovereign's injuries. There's another path nearby. Feng Yi spoke a little hesitantly, but the ancient formations on that path are even more complicated and hard to deal with. Venerable one, don't worry. Little brother Jiang is proficient in these mechanisms. There's no problem at all. Before Zhu Yao could even speak up, Zidan had already patted the fats on his chest, causing them to tremble. Hey, don't agree so easily. If it's not a 9-checkered Gamoku, I'm angry with you. Feng Yi nodded her head and turned to look at the wall that Fatty was stuck on earlier. Pressing on a brick with a different color, a teleportation formation immediately appeared on the wall. So the teleportation formation was hidden there. No wonder she did not see it. As expected of a demigod, Feng Yi's divine sense was indeed powerful, to the point where she could even detect the passageway hidden behind the formation. Not long after the three of them passed through the teleportation array. Then, there was the sound of a large number of demonic beasts running. It was a huge commotion. It seemed like Chenzi had already discovered that Feng Yi had escaped. That was why he released the demonic beast puppet to chase after him. The three of them discussed for a while, and decided to meet up with Xiaoyi first, and then leave the underground city first. What Feng Yi said was right. This passageway indeed had more mechanisms than the previous one. Basically, after walking for half an incense's worth of time, one would encounter one. Moreover, it was no longer low-end puzzles and Gamoku. Instead, it was Lianlian and Bubble Bobble. Apui? That's not right. There were even more 9 squares, and even 5 squares, and 7 squares had appeared as well. The difficulty had increased a little as well. It was no longer the simplest 9 squares. However, to a science graduate like Zhu Yao, it was merely the difference of spending 2 or 3 minutes. She completely did not need to spend too much effort. If not for the fact that 9 squares was a number game that originated from the ancient times, she would really suspect that someone from the same hometown had crossed over as well. However, Zidan and Feng Yi were even more shocked, as they stared fixedly at her face, as though they could see stars. Forget about Feng Yi. She did not even know when Zidan had learned how to speak so well, and even more exaggerated praises were being thrown at her as though they were free of charge. Zhu Yao suppressed the corner of her lips that was constantly on the verge of rising. If she were to praise her one more time, she would feel embarrassed. One more time. Wait a minute. What's there to be happy about solving these elementary school math problems? Zhu Yao was instantly dumbfounded. The center of the underground city should be right in front. Feng Yi pointed to the last 5 squares, and her tone was much gentler than before. The eyes she was looking at Zhu Yao carried an additional hint of praise, though her arrogance remained the same. Zhu Yao spent 3 minutes to solve the last 5 squares, and the sealed wall opened to the 2 sides. As expected, it was the buried city they saw when they entered. As long as they found that puzzle formation, they would be able to return to Yutsong City. Just as the 4 of them were planning to walk out of the passage, they suddenly heard a familiar voice. When I find my master and settle everything, I will bring you away from Yutsong City and head to an otherworldly realm. Are you really willing to bring me away? An enchanting voice asked. At the exit of the passage, 2 figures, one white and one red, appeared. Zhu Yao instinctively felt her heart thumping, and suddenly, she felt as though a melodramatic drama was about to start airing again. Zhu Yao silently glanced at Feng Yi next to her, and as expected, her face instantly paled a little. Cuckoo, junior martial brother Xiao. Zhu Yao took the initiative to greet him. In the midst of the enemy's camp, she could forget about internal conflicts. After all, she was destined to be cannon fodder. Unfortunately, he did not give her any face and completely ignored her. Instead, he took the initiative to wrap his arms around the woman in red in front of him and continued to confess his love. Of course it's true. How can I let you go now? Hearing that, Ruiyu blushed and lowered her head shyly. Hey, Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi. Zhu Yao waved her hand. Please, even if you want to put on a melodramatic drama, you have to look at the situation first. Feng Yi was here. However, Xiaoyi still did not have any reaction. He hugged Ruiyu even tighter and began to act. Oops. He can't hear you. Zidan angrily shook the flesh on his face and pointed at the exit at the very front of the tunnel. There's still a formation that hasn't been undone. It probably has the effect of isolating aura, so we can see them, but they can't see us. Zhu Yao took a closer look. As expected, there were a few transparent numbers floating in the air at the exit. It was another grid of 9 squares. Just as he was about to undo it and take a closer look, Mama's egg, this grid of 9 squares was a little too big, wasn't it? The grids were even connected to the wall. Zhu Yao wiped off her cold sweat. It would take at least half an hour to undo this. Zhu Yao silently lit a candle for Xiao Yi. The show outside was still going on, and it was even a big erotic show. In the beginning, Xiao Yi was only hugging Ruiyu. But the more he hugged, the lower it went, and gradually, It went towards the indescribable part. The entire scene instantly became hot. The rising and falling sounds of panting could be heard as well. The faces of the other two people in the cave instantly darkened to the bottom of a pot. Humph. Shameless. Zidan simply could not help but scold. Feng Yi did not refute, and simply turned her gaze away as well. Her expression was unclear. Seeing that Feng Yi's expression was a little ugly, Zhu Yao could not help but persuade her. Actually, Xiaoyi is quite worried about you. Initially, the sect master had arranged for senior martial brother Zidan and I to save you, but he strongly requested for us to come together. As a woman as well, she could only try her best to console her. As expected of a high mountain flower, Feng Yi was actually able to hold it in and did not explode. Instead, her brows furrowed even deeper. Xiaolang, are we not going to look for your master? Ruiyu wrapped her legs around Xiaoyi's waist and asked as she panted. Xiaoyi was currently in high spirits and casually replied, "There's no rush right now." Feng Yi's face once again darkened. He shouldn't tear down her own act like this. Zhu Yao gave a face. Ho, he's actually very concerned about your safety. Xiaolang, between me and your master, who's more important? Ruiyu once again asked. Naturally, it's you. All right, she tried her best. Whatever. In any case, my life is yours. Even if others don't care about it, in reality, it doesn't have much to do with you either, right? Zhu Yao persuaded a few words and no longer interrupted as she seriously unraveled the 9 squares. As she unraveled it, she listened to the music that was constantly ringing in her ears. She was intoxicated as well. Feng Yi did not speak the entire time, as she tried her best to maintain her image as a high mountain flower. However, the hands that were getting tighter and tighter by her side had revealed her emotions. Zhu Yao had long known that their master-disciple relationship was not ordinary. Although it had not reached the surface, there was definitely quite a bit of intimacy. It was normal for her to be unable to calm down after personally witnessing a man's betrayal. Feng Yi calmed down the anger in her chest. Although she knew that her disciple had always been dissolute, most of the men in the world were like that. And that woman's body was filled with an evil aura, and she was actually a demonic practitioner. Why would her disciple be so entangled with her? In the past, she did not mind about his private matters, however. She never expected that he would actually not conceal it to such an extent. In an instant, layers of anger surged in her heart, filling her heart. In the beginning, her heart, which had always been calm, was stirred into chaos. Only when the person beside her, who was proficient in mechanisms and formations, spoke out to dissuade her, did she instantly calm down. Lowering her head, she looked at the person who was still squatting on the ground, writing and drawing. He was right. Her life was her own. Even if others did not care about it or worry about it, what did it have to do with her? Closing her eyes, the ripples that had just risen in the depths of her heart receded, and she was even calmer than before. A casual sentence from Zhu Yao, who was focused on dealing with the 9 squares, had extinguished the thoughts that Feng Yi finally had for Xiao Yi in her heart. Furthermore, antibodies were formed, and they would no longer sprout. The 9 squares were about to be unraveled, and the free show outside had already ended as well. The two of them had long been neatly dressed and were hugging each other as they sat on the ground. Zhu Yao did not know if it was her imagination, but she felt that the spiritual energy between the two of them was a little dense. Especially, Xiao Yi's face was glowing. That's not right. When did Xiao Yi's cultivation reach the 3rd level of nascent soul? Chapter 76. Zhu Yao suddenly recalled the predecessor of Ruiyu's mystic art. Could it be that she used a pair cultivation art? Ruiyu was a demigod, and she was an entire realm higher than Xiao Yi. If she were to undergo double pair, it would not be impossible for Xiao Yi to continuously rise by 2 ranks. No wonder he wanted to seize all the time he had to have sex with Ruiyu. He had even thrown the task of finding his master out of his mind. It seemed that his brain was not as simple as being overwhelmed by sperm. Then was his feelings for Ruiyu real or fake? Zhu Yao could not figure it out, and for a moment, she felt her head aching a little. She was really not good at things like scheming and plotting against one another. Rather than thinking about these, she might as well solve the 9 palace grid. Just as he was about to have Zidan turn the final number on the grid into a rune, suddenly, a loud sound rang out from the outside. A 6th-ranked demonic beast came out of nowhere, pouncing towards Xiao Yi and Rueyu. A mere rank 6 demonic beast naturally couldn't hurt them. The two of them dodged and retreated 3 feet away. Rueyu shot out a wind blade, and the demonic beast was cut into 2 halves. Chenzi, you're finally willing to come out. Rueyu sneered and looked at the black gas floating in the sky. A man who was as skinny as a skeleton appeared in the middle of the black chi, and there were faint black marks on his withered face. It was actually Chenzi. Zhu Yao recalled for a moment. Back then, when he was abducting people in ancient hill sect, he clearly wasn't like this. In just a few short days, why did he become like this? Where's Feng Yi? Where was Feng Yi? Where did you hide her? Chun Zai's eyes bulged out. His face was filled with madness as he interrogated. Rueyu looked at his appearance, and her eyes flashed with ruthlessness. I told you long ago, that is a remnant page of the ancient demon race's cultivation method. It will corrode the body, so how can a human cultivator cultivate it? Yet, in order to obtain that woman, you forcefully continued to practice and even attacked me. Serves him right. He doesn't look like a human or a demon. Shut up. Shut up. Chunzi became even more frenzied. Black smoke gathered in his hands, and immediately, 4 demonic beasts appeared to attack. Rueyu and Xiaoyi took 2 each, and once again, they easily dealt with them. You don't want to hear it, but I want to say it. Rueyu sneered. Look at what you've become now. Forget about the Feng Yi of the cultivation world. Even ordinary people would feel disgusted when they see you. No, it won't. Feng Yi will like me. She will. Chenzi had completely gone crazy. Scratching the loose skin on his face, he suddenly thought of something. He took out something from his side and muttered to himself, I have this. They can definitely cure me. As long as I gather enough people, I can cultivate a body that will never rot. Water spirit. Xiao Yi's eyes shone, and he could not help but exclaim out. A hint of wild joy flashed past his face. Zhu Yao recognized it as well, because the moment he took out the water spirit, the wood spirit in her divine sense let out a chick sound and woke up. Tell me where she is. If you don't speak, I'll kill you. Chun Zi's expression changed, and he urged the black smoke around his body to attack. Xiao Yi and Rueyu dodged in time. The moment the ground came into contact with the black miasma, a huge pit was instantly corroded out, swallowing half of the underground city, and black bubbles were even emitting out from the pit. Zhu Yao was shocked as well. Earlier, she basically did not see him circulating any spiritual energy at all. What was this? Xiao Yi and Rueyu had no choice but to fly up, and Chenzi once again attacked. Although he was only a nascent soul paragon, and his cultivation was far from Rueyu's. However, it was unknown if it was because the mystic art he was training in was too strange. Rueyu could not gain any advantage in his hands either. Especially that thick black smoke, the two of them did not dare to approach. However, the suppression of the realm was absolute. After a long period of time, Chenzi revealed a fatigued look, and his aura began to become unstable as well. With a wave of his hand, he once again materialized a dozen or so demonic beasts and dragged the two of them back a short distance. Taking out the water spirit, he circulated his spiritual energy, planning to recover the spiritual energy he lost. Rueyu saw through his intentions, and her expression turned cold. Suddenly, she materialized thousands of icicles and shot them out. Most of them were blocked by the demonic beasts, however. An extremely small ice blade pierced through and coincidentally hit the water spirit in Chenzi's hand and instantly froze the water spirit. A hint of a smile leaked out from Rueyu's lips. Retracting her hand, the water spirit instantly flew towards her. Return my water spirit. Chunzi was furious. Materializing black smoke, he struck straight towards the water spirit. The icicles instantly melted, but the black miasma did not dissipate and headed straight towards Rueyu. She could only retreat and dodge. The water spirit fell from the sky. Coincidentally, Zhu Yao had unlocked the final square at this moment. The passageway was too narrow, She was really worried that if Chanzi were to throw a ball of black smoke over, they would all be wiped out. The most important thing is, little water spirit, I'm here. Just as she was planning to head out, a figure flashed past, and the falling water spirit was caught by Feng Yi. Zhu Yao, Master. Xiaoyi delightfully took 2 steps forward. Feng Yi, you're back. Chanzi was even more overjoyed. Even the drooping skin on his face began to tremble as he looked at Feng Yi in the sky with infatuation. Feng Yi frowned, however. She did not care about Xiaoyi. She simply looked coldly at the other person below, who had lost all rationality. In the next moment, the pressure of a demigod was completely released. The moment Zhu Yao walked out of the passageway, she was pressed to the ground. The hell, even if you want to take revenge, don't attack indiscriminately. Chen Zi was forced to kneel on the ground by the pressure as well, however, as though he did not feel it at all. He raised his head and looked at Feng Yi with infatuation. As he muttered her name, he struggled to stand up and wanted to approach her. The killing intent on Feng Yi's face grew thicker, and she said word by word, "You deserve to die." Feng Yi. Chen Zi, however, was still looking at her, as though he did not hear her words, and he even revealed an extremely strange smile. Feng Yi immediately summoned her own intense sword. A scarlet-red sword of light. She mercilessly raised her hand and threw it straight towards Chen Zi. However, Chen Zi did not resist and did not even dodge. His chest was pierced by Feng Yi's sword intent, yet that strange smile still hung on his face, and his smile grew even deeper. "This is good as well. We can finally be together. Ha ha ha." Flames strangely emitted from his body. However, they were black flames, and his strange smile could be seen everywhere in the sky. Zhu Yao suddenly had a bad premonition. Just at the moment when Chen Zi was burnt into ashes by the black flames, the wood spirit in Feng Yi's hands suddenly flashed with a black light, and a gigantic black hole appeared behind her. Before anyone could react, it sucked her in. "Master!" Xiaoyi was greatly shocked. He reached out his hand, only to grab onto empty air. "The hell, water spirit! Don't!" Zhu Yao flew up, pounced forward, and coincidentally grabbed onto Feng Yi's hand, the water spirit in her hands. And then, they fell into it together. Feng Yi widened her eyes as she looked at him in disbelief. Just as Zhu Yao was about to speak, a ton of fat meat suddenly smashed onto her back, and she almost puked out a mouthful of blood. "The hell, fatty, what are you doing?" The moment they fell into the black hole, a huge pressure came, and the 3 of them lost consciousness at the same time. Yu Yan's mood these few days was a little bad. In order to find the water spirit, that stupid disciple of his had decided to hide her identity and search for an opportunity. Although he was worried, at the very least, they were in his own sect, and he could take care of them a little. Hence, he allowed her to do as she pleased. However, in the first few days, his disciple was still looking for opportunities to report to him about the situation. However, in the past few days, she had suddenly stopped coming. For 4 consecutive days, he did not even see the shadow of his stupid disciple. His master was very angry, and the consequences were very severe. After pondering for a moment, he decided to first call for her with the celestial crane. In the end, the celestial crane flew 1 round around Ancient Hill Sect, and then it flew back. His disciple still did not appear. Yu Yan's brows furrowed even more. Finally, he could not help but release his divine sense, and the scene of the entire Ancient Hill Sect instantly entered his eyes. However, he did not see his disciple's figure. Not in the house, not in the beast-taming mountain, and even more so, not in Ancient Hill Sect. Yu Yan felt his heart skip a beat. He seemed to have lost his disciple again. Zhu Yao, who had just woken up, looked at the grayish-white scene in front of her, and could not help but beat her chest and stomp her feet again. She just knew that nothing good would come out of following that Xiaoyi. And he even had the all-party members die buff. She was definitely going to have a life of cannon fodder. So, was this the rhythm of Zhu Yao 4.0 coming online? "You're awake?" A gentle female voice resounded next to her. The voice carried a hint of hesitation. Zhu Yao turned to look, and it was actually Feng Yi. "It can't be," Party resurrection? No, wait. Zhu Yao looked at her surroundings and just happened to see a lump of flesh was currently pressing down on her leg. Fatty. In that case, she did not die? Zhu Yao thought of this possibility in hindsight. She was actually still alive. For a moment, she was both sad and happy, and she did not even know how to react. This was way too damn touching. You. Why did you jump in as well? Feng Yi suddenly asked out of nowhere and looked straight at her, as though the answer to this question was very important to her. Zhu Yao turned around. Feng Yi's expression changed, and she continued to ask, I'm not related to you in any way, nor do I have any sort of relationship with you. Why did you? If I don't save you, am I supposed to watch you die? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at her. Was there a need to ask such a question? Of course, her main goal was still Shui Ling, and saving her was just a convenience. Feng Yi was stumped by his words, and her expression changed. Just as she was about to continue asking, Zidan suddenly woke up. His large fats trembled for a moment, and he raised his head. Little brother? Zidan was startled. Are you all right? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. If you had moved down from my leg, I would have been fine. His leg was about to be crushed, you know? Only then did Zidan realize that he had fallen onto her leg. With an embarrassed smile, he crawled up. Little brother, do you know where this is? Zidan looked a little dumbfoundedly at the grayish-white ground in front of him. Zhu Yao rubbed her leg that was numb from the pressure and shook her head. That Chen Zi must have done something to Shui Ling, which was why we were teleported here. Just thinking about it, this isn't a good place. This place was barren, and between the heaven and earth, everything was grayish-white. There wasn't the slightest bit of life, which was why she misunderstood that she had died once again and returned to the time when she was being reborn. There's no spiritual energy here. Feng Yi said. What? Zidan was startled, and he suddenly widened his eyes. How is this possible? How can there be a place without spiritual energy in this world? It's only the strength of the spiritual energy, unless it's... Could it be? Zidan's eyes widened even more, and his face was filled with disbelief. Feng Yi, however, nodded, and his expression instantly turned grayish-white. Speak clearly, just what in the world is this place? There's still a spectator who doesn't know the truth here, hey. Chapter 77. Little brother. Zidan let out a heavy sigh. This is the desolate lands. The wilderness? What does that mean? The wildlands is the battlefield of the primordial fiend gods. Zidan explained. Since the primordial era, it had already been sealed. This place was lacking in spiritual energy, and not even a blade of grass grew here. It was a land of death. Legend has it that no man or beast could survive here. In ancient times, Yutsong City was connected to this place, but after the seal, no one found the entrance. In other words, we can't get out? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded. If that was the case, they might as well just die. Zidan nodded affirmatively. Zhu Yao suddenly missed version 4.0 a little. Ever since they started talking about the desolate lands, Feng Yi had stopped speaking. Instead, she began to meditate at the side, reverting back to the appearance of a flower on a high mountain. Zhu Yao lightly sighed. That Chunzhe had long gone insane, and he had been yearning for Feng Yi all this while. He had finally managed to obtain her with all his might, yet, in just a few days, she ran away again. It was no wonder that even if they were to die, they still wanted to scam her. Sending Feng Yi to this place where one could only enter and not exit, most likely, they had the thought of perishing together with her, right? However, they never expected that they, 2 cannon fodders, would be added in as well. Cannon fodder number 1 pushed cannon fodder number 2, senior brother. Since that Shenzi was able to send us in, he must have a way to get out, right? She remembered that she was sucked in by a black hole, and the formation of the black hole was somewhat similar to a formation. Originally there was. Zidan sighed. Sovereign Feng Yi is a demigod stage practitioner. If she were to give it her all, she would be able to tear open the void and return to the cultivation world. But now, Martial Uncle Feng has yet to recover from her injuries, and there is no spiritual qi in this world, so I can't heal you. That is to say, as long as her injuries are healed. Zhu Yao said. Little brother, could it be that you have a way? Zidan was delighted. Did you forget that I also have a wood spirit root? I don't have spiritual energy, but I can transfer spiritual energy to her. Wasn't this one of the missions that she was sent here for? Absolutely not, Zidan said. With your nascent soul cultivation, the spiritual qi in your body won't be able to heal Martial Uncle's injuries. Moreover, if you exhaust your spiritual qi in this world, you will be in danger. So serious? Zhu Yao was speechless. She seemed to have emptied her spiritual energy several times, but she was fine. Sigh. If I had known earlier, I would have healed Martial Uncle before coming out. Zidan sighed. It was a pity that money could not buy one's foresight. That Qian Zi sure is ruthless. Even at death's door, he still wanted to drag senior Martial Uncle along with him. Zhu Yao glanced at Feng Yi, who was currently pretending to be pretentious and meditating. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. Senior Martial brother, can we use the water spirit to heal her? Zhu Yao suggested. Zidan slapped his head. That's right. How could I have forgotten about this? Water spiritual energy is the most gentle and most suitable for healing injuries. With the assistance of the water spiritual energy, little brother may not need to use all of his spiritual energy to heal Martial Uncle. There's no time to lose. Let's start now. Brother, be careful. Just do your best. Don't force yourself. Zhu Yao nodded and walked to Feng Yi's side. He sat down cross-legged. Venerable one, can I borrow the water spirit? I'll heal you first, and I'll return it to you when I'm done. Feng Yi opened her eyes. Naturally, she had heard the conversation earlier as well, and she did not hesitate. He handed over the water spirit and closed his eyes again. Zhu Yao unceremoniously took the water spirit from her hands and stored it in her divine sense. As soon as Shui Ling entered, the wood spirit excitedly began to circle around it, chirping as it circled. On the other hand, Shui Ling didn't show any reaction. It was as quiet as a blue gem. After much difficulty, she finally managed to pacify the wood spirit and instructed it to convert the spiritual energy in its body into wood spiritual energy, and then, through the water spirit, convert it into healing spiritual energy of the water attribute. Reaching out her hand, she wanted to transfer it into Feng Yi's body. However, she was blocked by the robe she was wearing. Zhu Yao frowned. She instinctively leaned forward, and with a whoosh, she pulled open the mystic robe in front of her chest. Feng Yi fiercely opened her eyes, and without any hesitation, she swung a slap towards Zhu Yao's face. The hell? Zhu Yao could not help but curse out as she retaliated with a slap. You. Feng Yi looked at him with a face of disbelief. She did not know if she was shocked that he had stripped off her clothes, or that he had slapped the number one beauty in the cultivation world. You dare. Do you want to die? You're wearing so much. How am I supposed to heal you? Heal me if you want. This old lady here was not even willing to serve her anymore. Initially, she was already in a bad mood when she was forcefully dragged here to save Zhu Yao. Ever since they met, the other party even put on an attitude of, it's your fortune that I'm willing to let you guys save me. Why aren't you guys kneeling and licking my feet? Just who did she offend? She was in a rush to slap her face. Senior Martial Aunt, don't misunderstand. Seeing that the situation was not right, Zidan immediately came out to smooth things over. This mystic robe of yours is able to block healing arts. Little brother has no choice but to do so. Only then did Feng Yi's expression soften a little. However, she still looked at the man in front of her a little indignantly. As though she was suppressing the anger in the depths of her heart with all her might, she then pulled open a corner of her robe, revealing a palm-sized inner robe, and angrily turned her head around. Zhu Yao silently rolled her eyes. It's not like he's Chen Zi, and he thought he cared about looking at you? What you have, I have had it before as well twice. Amen. Other than her breasts. Taking a deep breath, she once again gathered some water and with spiritual energy, and then cast a healing art. Reaching out her palm, she placed it on her shoulder and tried her best to repair the damaged meridians in her body. Zidan had long turned around to protect her at the side to avoid arousing suspicion. Only after Zhu Yao injected spiritual energy into Feng Yi's body did she realize how deep that Qin Zi's obsession with Feng Yi was, and how ruthless he was in his attacks. The few large meridians in her body were all damaged, and spiritual energy was currently scattering in all directions. It was fortunate that she was able to endure such injuries and follow them around the underground city. As expected of a practitioner who was able to cultivate to the demigod stage, she was really good at enduring. Thinking about the reason why she was able to forcefully summon her sword intent and kill Chen Zi with such a body, it was also because of her pride as a demigod stage practitioner. It was also because of her pride as a soul formation cultivator. Being kidnapped this time was probably a great humiliation to her. Zhu Yao silently retracted the disdain she had for her earlier. On this point, Zhu Yao respected her for being a man. She began to attentively help her repair her meridians. After spending exactly 6 hours, Zhu Yao only managed to repair a large portion of her meridians, and only the last large meridian had yet to be connected. This meridian was especially important. Once it was repaired, it could not be interrupted, otherwise, all her previous efforts would be wasted. Just when Zhu Yao was halfway through her repair, a series of rumbling sounds could be heard from afar. In the beginning, she could only faintly hear some noises, but in the end, the thunderous sounds grew louder and louder, as though an army was pressing down on them. Zidan fiercely stood up. This is a beast wave of demonic beasts. The hell, what happened to the promised desolate land? What happened to the promised place where humans and beasts could not survive? What the hell? Little brother, don't be anxious. It's just a mere beast wave. Leave it to me. Zidan patted on his chest and said with an expression of, I'm here for everything. Focus on healing Zhu Yao. I will definitely not let those demonic beasts take a step closer to you. After saying that, he summoned his flying sword and hurriedly flew several meters forward. Before Zhu Yao could even feel touched, a few seconds later, Zidan ran back and even shouted as he ran. Little brother, hurry and run. The hell, what happened to the promised, I'm here for everything? Zhu Yao was dumbfounded. 10th ranked demonic beasts. Zidan turned his head and shouted as he ran. A large group of 10th ranked demonic beasts. 10th ranked, and a group at that. Zhu Yao made a prompt decision and hugged onto Feng Yi next to her. As she continuously poured out spiritual energy, she summoned her flying sword and flew on it. Zidan, who was still running wildly, slapped his head. I forgot that I can fly as well. He flew on his flying sword as well. However, the demonic beasts behind them seemed to have set their sights on them, as they chased after them while howling. Their momentum was so great that even the sky was filled with the dust they brought up, as though the entire world was trembling. Zhu Yao basically did not dare to turn her head back. In the first place, flying on a flying sword in a world without spiritual energy like this was already very difficult, and she just had to bring someone along. What's even worse was that she had to continuously pour out spiritual energy. Slowly, she was already losing her strength. However, the beast wave still did not give up. After flying for an entire hour, they were still unable to shake them off. There's a narrow valley in front. Zidan pointed to the bare cliff in front of them. Let's hide in there. All right. Zhu Yao followed after him. However, before entering, she secretly released Sesame. A mere narrow valley, most likely would not be able to stop a group of 10th-ranked demonic beasts. She could only hope that Sesame's 11th-ranked identity would be able to intimidate them. Zidan led the way to the deepest part of the narrow valley and hurriedly laid down a presence-concealing formation. The moment Zhu Yao landed on the ground, Feng Yi, who had been supporting her, puked out a mouthful of blood. Oh no! Zhu Yao hurriedly sat down once again and frantically circulated the spiritual energy in her body to wrap around her damaged meridians. She was already as tired as a dog in the first place, and this action had undoubtedly consumed even more of her spiritual energy. Her head was already drenched in sweat. Feng Yi opened her eyes, looked at him with an unknown meaning, and then closed them once again. Fortunately, she was in time, and the spiritual energy did not go out of control and cause a backlash to the other meridians which were already in good condition. Zhu Yao silently heaved a sigh of relief and calmed her heart to complete the final task. An hour later, the top of the narrow valley suddenly quietened down until the terrifying roars of beasts could no longer be heard. It seems like the beast wave has already left. Zidan heaved a sigh of relief. Zhu Yao was finally done repairing her meridians as well, and the spiritual energy in her body was almost exhausted as well. Her body tilted, and she collapsed onto the ground, unable to get up. Little brother. Zidan hurriedly went forward to support her. Feng Yi opened her eyes, glanced at Zhu Yao, and cast a soothing mystic art on her. Biting her lower lips, she said a moment later, "Thank you." Amen. Zhu Yao was so tired that she no longer had the strength to speak. Senior Martial Ant, please hurry and return to the cultivation world. Zidan anxiously said, "There's no spiritual energy here, little brother. I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on for long." Feng Yi clenched her fists, turned around, and cast an art. The spiritual energy in her entire body began to circulate, and a huge gale blew. With a wave of her hand, she forcefully slashed in the air, and a black hole floated 5 feet in front of her. Feng Yi, who had used up all of her spiritual energy, was a little unable to endure it as well. She took 2 steps back, and then she walked towards that black hole. "Let's go." She once again turned to look at Zhu Yao, and then she walked into the black hole. Chapter 78. The black hole this time, however, did not give off an irresistible pressure like before. Seemingly in a blink of an eye, they were standing on a beach, and in front of them was a boundless ocean. The air was filled with spiritual energy, and Zhu Yao felt as though she had come back to life. She, Hu Hansan, had finally returned. Feng Yi, who came out before them, was already meditating on the ground to recover her spiritual energy. Zhu Yao followed suit and sat down to recover as well, while Zidan stood guard at the side. 15 minutes later, everyone's expressions finally recovered a little. Feng Yi stood up, looked at Zhu Yao, and clenched her fists as though she was hesitating about something. In the end, she still walked over and retracted that prideful expression of hers. "Thank you for saving my life." She thanked her with such a serious expression, Zhu Yao felt a little embarrassed. "You're welcome. I was merely following the sect master's orders." "Still, I have to thank you." Feng Yi looked straight at her. If there's anything I can be of use to, I will do my best as well." "Really?" Zhu Yao suddenly recalled something. Feng Yi nodded. "Then give me the water spirit." Although the water spirit was still in her divine sense, it was still hers after all. Unexpectedly, Feng Yi did not even hesitate, and instead replied with a smile, "If you want it, I naturally won't reject you." "Thank you." Zhu Yao thanked her sincerely. She did not expect that the water spirit this time would be obtained so smoothly. She had even thought that there would be a tough battle. After pondering for a moment, she took out the water spirit from her divine sense, walked towards the ocean in front, and placed the water spirit directly into the water. "Water spirit, hurry and leave. Return to the ocean." The moment her voice fell, the water spirit that was still obediently lying in her hands like a sapphire earlier, suddenly emitted out a blue light and turned into a real water droplet. Floating in the air, it looked as though it was blinking its eyes and looking at her suspiciously. "Chick?" It let out the same sound as the wood spirit. Zhu Yao smiled. She knew that it was the same as the wood spirit and could understand other people's words. However, this water spirit was quieter and not as lively as the wood spirit. "Return to the water. No matter what, do not appear in front of others again." The greed of humans was something that could not be changed, just like the Shaoyi in the dream. Clearly, he only possessed the metal and would dual spirit veins, and logically speaking, he only needed these 2. However, he had all 5 spirits in his hands, and he was not even willing to let go of his ascension. Most likely, the others were the same as well. It was just that the others did not have Shaoyi's fortuitous encounter. Hence, Shaoyi was a bug. As long as the 5 spirits existed, there would be endless bugs in this world. Only by making it impossible for people to find the 5 spirits could the problem be solved from the root. Gee, Shui Ling paused for a moment before suddenly seeming to understand something, jumping up and down in joy. He suddenly flew over to her, kissed her, and then sank into the sea. He could no longer be seen. You. What happened to you? Feng Yi looked at her with a face of disbelief. She never thought that the reason why he asked her for the water spirit was just to let it go. Little brother, why did you release the water spirit? Zidan was stunned as well. Hee, I don't have a water spirit root, so this is useless to me. Why don't you let him go? Zhu Yao said without a care. Even if it's not, it's still a rare treasure. Not only did you release it, but you also forbade it from appearing in front of others. To prevent others from using it to do bad things, Zhu Yao explained. How do you think Chanzi managed to cultivate such a terrifying demonic art, and how did he break the great mountain barrier formation of ancient hill sect from the sea? It's most likely because of the water spirit. That's true. The corner of Feng Yi's lips moved, as though she wanted to say something. In the end, she still sighed. You're really an idiot. After looking at her, the smile at the corner of her lips deepened. Zhu Yao suddenly trembled a little unnaturally and shook her head to shake off that strange feeling. Ha 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 ha, little brother, you're still the broad-minded one. Zidan praised and habitually slapped her back. Zhu Yao's heart instantly churned, and with a poo sound, she spat out blood all over his face. What happened to you? Feng Yi was the first to react, and hurriedly held on to her who was on the verge of collapse. Her expression was no longer as calm as before, and even her hands which were inspecting her injuries were trembling a little. Why aren't you recovering your spiritual energy? After checking, he realized that he still didn't have any spiritual energy left in his body. In addition, he had just been chased by the herd of beasts and had forcefully repaired her meridians, so he had already suffered a huge backlash of magic power. It seems like I can't recover my spiritual qi. Feng Yi and Zidan were both stunned, and they did not know how to help her either. They had never heard of anyone being unable to recover their spiritual energy after suffering from a backlash of mystic energy. Could it be that she had suffered an injury that they couldn't see? For a moment, the two of them were at a loss of what to do. Feng Yi was a little flustered, as she hurriedly transferred her own with spiritual energy over. However, the moment it entered her body, it dispersed. What should we do? I need to recover my spiritual qi as soon as possible. Zhu Yao's hand had turned purple from her grip. She had the thunder spiritual root, so the wood spiritual root was useless to her. It wasn't that she didn't want to recover, but she didn't dare to casually guide the spiritual qi into her body. If she wasn't careful, it might cause another spiritual qi riot. Therefore, she could only wait for her spiritual power to recover on its own. Back when she was in the foundation building realm, it was still fine. There wasn't much spiritual aura in her body, so she could recover after a night's sleep. Later, Jindan required 10 days, but now, it seemed that he wouldn't be able to recover in a few months. She really missed her master's purple lightning bolt. As though he had heard her summon, after Zhu Yao puked out her third mouthful of blood, a familiar figure sprinted over from the horizon. Dressed in white, it fluttered even though there was no wind, and on his face that was as cold as ice, his eyes were currently staring at the person who was puking out blood on the ground. Senior Marshal Uncle Yu Yin. Feng Yi was startled. Before she could even react, she saw him wave his hand, and the youth in her embrace had already flown into his hands. And then, without saying a single word, he turned around and flew away, leaving behind the two people on the ground who were completely unaware of the situation. Ancestral Martial Uncle, this is... Zidan was startled, and then, his eyes suddenly shone, as he guessed. Could it be that he has a way to save little brother? A hint of joy flashed past Feng Yi's face as well. If it was that person, he would definitely have a way. Thank you, Ancestral Martial Uncle, for saving us. Zidan happily shouted towards the direction where the person disappeared. And currently, a certain master was fuming with anger. Looking at his stupid disciple who was still puking out blood in his embrace, he wished that he could immediately teach her a lesson. The moment he did not look at her, she would turn herself into something unrecognizable. Was there a disciple who behaved like this? Master Father. Zhu Yao felt that she was about to cry. Earlier, no matter how bitter or tired she was, she did not feel anything. However, the moment she saw him, for some reason, she felt so wronged. Hugging onto his neck, she buried her head into his embrace. Master, it hurts. A certain master turned and glanced at her and coldly said, bear with it. Can't we just play around happily? Recently, ZMO was a little troubled. ZMO expressed that it was not easy to be the sect master of Ancient Hill Sect. No matter how big or small the miscellaneous matters were, he had to ask about them. When he had nothing better to do, he even had to mediate the relationship between the various mountains, the allocation of personnel, and so on. Take the newly joined elder, for example. If not for his pair of fiery eyes, which allowed him to discover the unusual relationship between him and his ancestral martial uncle, which could not be revealed to the world, he might have really treated him as a casual elder and dealt with him. However, this person was not easy to deal with. The fact that the Grand Uncle Master assigned him to him meant that he believed in his abilities. He definitely could not disappoint the Grand Uncle Master's hopes, so he arranged for him to be at the Taming Beast Peak, which he was good at. In order to give him more prestige, he even assigned him the glorious task of rescuing the Venerable One. Sure enough, they succeeded in saving the Venerable One, and the Venerable One praised him a lot. Although he was slightly injured, it was negligible. The most important thing was, through this incident, his reputation in the sect had greatly increased, and he had quickly and smoothly integrated into this large group. Wherever he went, there were praises for him. ZMO felt that his plan had succeeded. Ancestral Grand Uncle would definitely notice his efforts, and then he would greatly praise him. Perhaps, if he was happy, he might even throw him one or two precious treasures. Just thinking about it made him a little excited. ZMO's imagination ran wild, and just when he was planning to rest, a white figure silently appeared in front of his bed just like that, and a face made of ice was currently staring at him coldly. ZMO shivered, and he had almost rolled down from the bed. Grand Martial Uncle. His expression wasn't right. Recently, Yu Yin was a little irritable as well. He had accidentally taken in a worrisome disciple, causing him to be worried to death. Not only did he have to be on guard against her courting death, but he also had to be on guard against others leading her to courting death. In the past, his disciple always liked to run out. So be it. This time, he just placed her in the sect. At his own doorstep, she could come back in a half-dead state. It was simply impossible for him to guard against it. And the main culprit was actually the sect master ZMO, who had always been steady. Yu Yin felt that he definitely could not tolerate it. Why did he have to harm his one and only disciple instead of harming his entire clan's disciples? Hence, after treating his disciples' injuries, Yu Yin immediately charged into ZMO's room to denounce him. However, when he arrived at his destination, he recalled that his disciple had concealed her identity this time. ZMO basically did not know about it, and had simply treated her as a regular elder. For a moment, he had no reason to accuse her, but he was still unhappy. Therefore, she could only stare at him with a murderous aura. Stare at him. Stare at him. Stare at him. ZMO, who had his imagination run wild, was drenched in cold sweat from the stare. Yet, he did not understand what he had done wrong. As the sect master, ZMO could be considered as someone who was used to seeing big scenes. However, after being stared at by a person who was overflowing with killing intent for an entire hour, he would more or less be frightened. Even his legs were beginning to turn soft. Just as he was about to risk his life and ask what his ancestral grand uncle was thinking of, Yu Yin, once again, returned the same way he came. With a swoosh, he did not change. ZMO. That although he did not understand why his ancestral grand uncle was here, ZMO heaved a deep sigh of relief. He had the misconception that his life had been spared. Unfortunately, he was happy too early, because on the second day, Yu Yin once again appeared in his room. He still did not say a single word. After staring at him for an entire hour, he then left without saying a single word. This repeated for 3 days, and ZMO was about to collapse. Ancestral Grand Uncle, just what did I do wrong? Just tell me, and I will change, all right? Chapter 79. After his careful analysis and serious study of ancestral grand-uncle's actions, ZMO finally came to a conclusion. Could it be that he felt that he had not done enough, and Elder Jiangyu's current reputation had yet to reach the standard he expected? Of course, with Grand Uncle Master's title as the #1 person in the immortal cultivation world, Grand Uncle Master's current achievements were indeed beneath his notice. The more ZMO thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. He silently decided that in the future, he had to grab hold of all opportunities, and even if he did not have any, he had to create opportunities to increase the influence of Elder Jiangyu. Hence, Zhu Yao, who had just recovered from her injuries and was ruthlessly taught a lesson by her own master. When she returned to her own cave residence, she was thrown into a daze by the large amount of sect affairs that Wang Shuji brought over. Fuck, what happened to being a leisurely elder? How many spiritual plants had died in the medicine peak? How many medicinal herbs had been used in the elixir peak? How many talisman papers had been wasted in the talisman peak? Even how many cubs had been born in the taming beast peak? Why did she have to care about this situation? She didn't know how to deliver a baby. Big sis Zhu Yao? Wang Shuji looked a little worriedly at Zhu Yao, who was already on the verge of collapse. Are you all right? Hee, do I look fine to you? Zhu Yao replied with a bitter smile. This won't do. She had to look for ZMO and have a chat. She still had the heavy responsibility of saving the world on her shoulders. I heard you were injured 2 days ago. Wang Shuji was a little hesitant and looked at her guiltily. I'm sorry. I only found out today that you went to such a dangerous place. Zhu Yao turned her head and rolled her eyes at him. So what if you knew about it in advance? The rescue operation was something decided by the nascent soul stage upper echelons. As an Azoth stage practitioner, he naturally wouldn't know about it. If I knew, I naturally wouldn't have let big sis Zhu Yao take this risk. Wang Shuji was a little agitated. Yutsong City was the city of heretic practitioners, so how could he be at ease to let her go? Little wimp. Zhu Yao pressed his head down. This is an adult's matter. You should just focus on cultivating. What are you worrying about? Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji exploded and angrily pulled down her hand. I'm not a child anymore. Don't treat me like one. Yes, yes, yes. You're an adult now. Zhu Yao half-heartedly replied. Staring at the various account books in front of her, she suddenly had an idea. They were all piled up. Come, I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. Wang Shuji was startled for a moment. Letting out a deep sigh, he said, Don't tell me you're going to push all this on me from the start. How can you say it's a push? This is to train you. In any case, she wouldn't admit it no matter what. She patted his chest and said, A man must be responsible. Go, go. The chance to prove yourself is here. You can do it. You. Wang Shuji's face was full of confusion. After a long while, she sighed deeply and accepted the small mountain of account books. He put it into his storage pouch. You'll only acknowledge my abilities when you bully me? How could that be? Whether she bullied him or not, she didn't think that he had any ability. He's still a kid. Pat his head. This time, Wang Shuji did not resist and allowed her claws to be arrogant on her head. She looked at her familiar yet strange face and clenched her hands, as though he had decided on something. Big sis Zhu Yao, I've thought about what you told me the other day. What words? He pulled down Zhu Yao's troublesome hands. Yet, he did not let go, and tightly held onto her palm. The temperature of his palm was a little scorching. Zhu Yao awkwardly twitched, but did not move. A man cannot stand without his words, so I've decided to keep my promise. Just what was he trying to say? I've decided. Wang Shuji's hands suddenly tightened, to the point where Zhu Yao felt a little pain. No matter how you turn into, I will take you as my wife and take care of you for the rest of your life. Zhu Yao did not sit stably and almost fell off the chair. What the hell? She was just joking that day. He couldn't possibly have treated it seriously and seriously considered it, right? I know, with your current appearance, others will definitely have many misunderstandings towards us. Wang Shuji still explained with a stern look, but No matter what others say, just ignore them. Zhu Yao's face darkened when she heard this. He was actually even considering such worldly views. Just what was this little wimp thinking in his head during the few days she was not around? She could not help but reach out her hand to touch his forehead. You don't have a fever? Then why was he speaking nonsense? Big sis Zhu Yao, I'm serious. Wang Shuji grew anxious as he stared straight into her eyes. That expression of his was as serious as it could get. Zhu Yao felt her head aching. Having a little wimp who was overly serious about everything was truly terrifying. With lightning speed, she forcefully flicked her finger on his fair forehead. In order to achieve the desired effect, she had even infused her spiritual energy. Little wimp Wang instantly broke through, releasing her hand, and held onto his forehead instead. It was so painful that tears were about to fall out. Zhu Yao glanced at him with disdain. I was just joking that day, teasing you. Why are you treating it seriously? If you tease this old lady again, be careful that I don't spank your buttocks. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji held onto his forehead and glanced at her with teary eyes. Could it be that you think the words I said to you were merely the jokes of a child? Or else? Zhu Yao shrugged. Wang Shuji's face instantly flushed red. Widening his eyes, he ruthlessly glared at her a few times, as though he was suppressing his own anger with all his might. A moment later, he suddenly stood up and coldly snorted at her. Without even bidding farewell, he angrily left. Yo, he's rebelling now? The moment Wang Shuji left, he did not come to see her for a whole 6 to 7 days. This little wimp's temper sure is big. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment and felt that he had already entered the rebellious phase, and it was precisely the period where he especially liked to go against his parents. She silently pondered, should she change his education method? Just as she was pondering, the cry of a phoenix resounded. Sovereign Feng Yi suddenly descended from the mountain peak, and riding on that phoenix, she stopped in her courtyard. Why did this high mountain flower come to her place? She couldn't be planning to settle the score, right? Zhu Yao faintly had a bad premonition. Greetings to Sovereign Feng Yi. Zhu Yao stepped forward and bowed. No need to be so courteous. Feng Yi nodded. After sizing him up for a moment, she hesitantly spoke up. Your injuries, Zhu Yao smiled. They're already completely healed. When her master made a move, he alone was equivalent to 2. That's good then. Feng Yi seemed to heave a sigh of relief, and her expression eased up a little as well. As though she had never spoken to someone like this before, she seemed a little restrained. Sovereign, if you don't mind, do you want to take a seat in the courtyard? Zhu Yao suggested. Feng Yi nodded, and followed him to the stone chair in the courtyard to sit down. Only then did she speak up hesitantly. Is it possible for me to check on your injuries? After all, he was injured because of her. Without seeing it for herself, she was still worried. Zhu Yao generously reached out her paw. Take a look then, take a look then. In any case, she had to grab onto every single person who came to see her. Sect Master did it, Zidan did it, and even Little Wimp did it as well. It made her feel like reaching out her paw whenever she saw someone, and the only thing she lacked was a woof. Feng Yi looked for a moment, and her expression eased up a little. Retracting her hand, she then turned around and pulled out a large pile of items, placing them in front of her. There were medicinal pellets, spiritual herbs, and even a few unknown mystic tools. They were piled up on the entire table, and every single one of them was faintly emitting out spiritual energy. With a single glance, she could tell that they were incredible treasures. What was she trying to do? To flaunt her wealth? The reason why I came here this time is to thank you. Feng Yi glanced at her, as though it was her first time doing something like this. Her expression was a little uncomfortable. These are my thank you gifts. Zhu Yao was startled. She never expected that this Feng Yi would be such a good person. Looking at the table full of sparkling treasures, she really wanted to keep all of them into her pouch. However, she did not know when she would die. If these things were to follow her, it would be a complete waste. Never mind, there's no need for that. Zhu Yao pressed down on her restless paw. I didn't save you for these anyway. It's best if you take them back. Feng Yi blanked for a moment and was a little anxious. If you don't fancy these, feel free to tell me what you need. I will definitely find them for you. There's really no need. When she said that, Zhu Yao began to feel a little embarrassed. Didn't you give me the water spirit? What else is more precious than it? Feng Yi pondered for a moment. That was true. She did not insist any further and kept all of the items. Sighing, she then revealed a smile. You're really a strange person. Aren't you just as strange? Seeing that her expression had warmed up quite a bit, Zhu Yao's courage instantly grew. To tell you the truth, I hated you quite a bit in the past. Feng Yi looked at her with widened eyes, and her expression was a little disappointed. Zhu Yao continued. In the past, you always put on a prideful look that no one should get close to, as though everyone should be fawning over you. I finally barged into that secret room to save you with much difficulty, but I never expected that I would be despised by you. When she recalled the incident in the passageway, she could not help but retort. Seeing her lowering her head in guilt, she continued. But after interacting with you for a long time, I realized that you're not that bad after all. You have a rather good heart. At the very least, she understood gratitude. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given her the water spirit, right? Only then did Feng Yi's expression turn a little better. The hand she placed on her thigh tugged on her skirt a little reservedly, as though she was a little nervous. After hesitating for a moment, she spoke up. Then, what do you think of me right now? Pretty good. Zhu Yao replied with a huge smile. Continue to maintain it. Perhaps we might even become best friends. Before she could even finish, a Sword Mountain disciple suddenly flew down, cupped his fist, and bowed towards the two of them. Grand Marshal Ant, Elder Jiang, the sect master has instructed this disciple to inform the two of you to head to the Great Hall for a discussion. Discussion? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. That old man couldn't possibly be giving her a bunch of things again, right? What is it? The disciple replied. Senior Marshal Uncle Shaoyi has returned. Currently, he's in the Great Hall. Zhu Yao glanced at Feng Yi and nodded. Only then did they head towards the direction of the Great Hall of the main mountain. Chapter 80. Her doubts were answered when she saw Shaoyi standing alone at the center of the Great Hall, facing off against the mountain lords. Rueyu was not by his side. Most likely, he had spent the extra 3 days comforting Rueyu. Master! Seeing that they had entered the hall, Shaoyi welcomed them with a joyous expression. To be more precise, he welcomed Feng Yi. I'm glad you're safe and sound. Amen, Feng Yi replied indifferently, yet she brushed past him and walked towards the upper seat. Shaoyi's expression instantly turned a little ugly. In the end, there was a gap between the two of them. Zhu Yao rubbed her nose and found a chair to sit on as well. She had a little naughty thoughts in her mind. This scene was really something to see and hear. After taking a closer look at Shaoyi's cultivation, as expected, it had increased by quite a bit. Earlier, he was at the second level of the nascent soul stage, and now, he had already reached the pinnacle of the second level. Faintly, he looked as though he was about to break through to the third level. It seemed that in these 10 days, he and Rueyu had done a lot of things that they should do. His own master was imprisoned in the desolate lands, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Yet, he was immersed in the warmth of his lover. Thinking about it this way, losing Feng Yi's trust, he deserved it. Wait, why can I see his face now? The word bug on his face seemed to have faded a little. Zhu Yao was startled as she slightly raised her head. Fuck! The exclamation mark above his head had also disappeared. Was it because she had released Shui Ling that the trajectory had been slightly altered? The more Zhu Yao thought about it, the more she felt it was possible. In her dream, Shaoyi had obtained 3 spirits, and then, based on the connection between the 5 spirits, he summoned the earth spirit and the fire spirit. Currently, he only had the metal spirit in his hands. In other words, the earth spirit and the fire spirit would not be his. If she were to obtain the metal spirit in his hands as well, he would lose his only cheat, and naturally, he would no longer be a bug. When she thought of this, Zhu Yao instantly became excited. Senior Marshal Brother. He had colluded with evil cultivators. Since ancient times, good and evil could not coexist. This trend could not be allowed to persist. Sect Master, please handle this impartially. Zidan said with a furious expression. Xiaoyi frowned deeply. Senior Marshal Brother Zidan, please do not slander me. Do you have any proof that I'm colluding with heretical cultivators? Evidence? Zidan coldly snorted, as though he was extremely furious. Walking to Zhu Yao's side, he said furiously. You want proof, right? Brother, tell me, was he together with that demoness in Yucang City? Zhu Yao had no choice but to nod. So it was because of this matter. It was no wonder she and Feng Yi were called over in such a hurry. Heretic practitioners and deity practitioners had been fighting for so many years, and they had long been like fire and water. It was no wonder Zidan would be angry until now. This time, Xiaoyi had made a huge blunder. Xiaoyi's expression turned even uglier, however. He still refuted with confidence. Both of you are biased against me and Rueyu, and your words are not trustworthy. And even if I'm with her, it doesn't prove that I'm colluding with an evil cultivator. In any case, it's your turn. He looked at the two of them coldly and revealed a hint of disdain. Don't forget that she was the one who let you go in Yucang City. That's why you survived. Not only do you not know how to be grateful, but you also want to frame me. You are simply unreasonable. Zidan was instantly angered to the point where his hair was about to stand on end. Zhu Yao was even more dumbfounded by his words of changing the concept. Grateful to Rueyu? Did she hear wrongly? She was the one who caught them, but she had to thank her instead. What kind of joke was this? All right, even if you don't believe my and little brother Zhang's words, you should be able to believe your master's words, right? Zidan took a deep breath. Looking at Feng Yi, who was seated on top, he cupped his hands and said, Senior Marshal Ant, you saw the scene back then as well. Back then in the underground city. Was he colluding with that heretic cultivator? Zhu Yao sighed. Not only did she see it, she even watched a free show of You or Me. You or Me. Feng Yi recalled that live erotic scene as well, and her expression instantly darkened quite a bit. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and only after a while did she helplessly nod her head. Master! Xiaoyi widened his eyes and looked at Feng Yi with a face of disbelief. His expression instantly sank to the bottom, and his face was filled with, how can you not understand me look? Feng Yi did not care about him, and immediately turned her head away. Xiaoyi's face instantly turned ashen. Although seeing Xiaoyi suffer a setback, Zhu Yao still felt pretty good in the end. He did not deserve to die. If he was really convicted of the crime of colluding with a heretic cultivator, most likely, he would no longer have a place to stand in the cultivation world. Although he was a little of a stud, and would not be able to move his legs when he saw a beautiful woman, overall, he was not too detestable. Adding that back then in Yucang City, he could be considered to have saved her. Xiaoyi, are you really colluding with that heretic cultivator? Zemo's expression sank as well. The situation was serious. Although he was the sovereign's disciple, for the sake of ancient hill sect, he could not be lenient. I think there's a misunderstanding here. Zhu Yao stood up, stopped Zemo, and coughed. Actually, back then in Yucang City, the three of us were captured by that heretic cultivator, and the other party was a demigod stage practitioner. When her words fell, the great hall was instantly in an uproar. Heretic cultivators had always been hard to deal with, and they all had their own way of doing things. However, after so many years, the reason why the righteous sects were able to suppress them was because there were demigod stage practitioners in the righteous sects. Although heretic cultivators could cultivate faster than disciples of righteous sects by relying on heretic arts, they were still unable to reach the peak. Now, however, a demigod stage practitioner had appeared, and everyone could not help but exclaim in shock. To the righteous sects, this was definitely a huge threat. Back then, the three of us were not her match, and we almost died. We lost our lives in her hands. Zhu Yao continued. In the end, Xiao Yi was quick-witted and bewitched that female practitioner, allowing him to save everyone. But clearly, he and that woman. Zidan was still indignant and wanted to speak up. Zhu Yao pulled him. Senior Marshal Brother, back then, the entire place was filled with heretic practitioners. I believe Junior Marshal Brother Xiao had no other choice, and thus, he disguised himself. If he really betrayed the sect, why would he return? and walk right into the trap. Zidan frowned and pondered for a moment before he no longer argued. So Junior Marshal Brother Xiao was merely putting on a show and deceived that heretic practitioner. Zhu Yao looked towards Xiao Yi at the center. Don't you think so? Xiao Yi gritted his teeth, and a moment later, he spat out a single word. Yes. Zmo frowned. He had a feeling that this matter was not that simple. After pondering for a moment, he said, Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, since you've already returned, it means that you have completely severed your ties with that female practitioner. You definitely shouldn't continue to talk about that heretic practitioner and even cause Junior Marshal Brother Zidan to misunderstand. Xiao Yi simply lowered his head and did not reply, as though he had silently agreed to his words. Although the truth is clear now, at this moment, we will not pursue this matter any further, Zmo continued. However, just in case, and to prevent that heretic practitioner from taking the opportunity to take revenge, Junior Marshal Brother Xiao is not allowed to leave the mountain for the next 200 years. This was the best way to handle this matter. Firstly, he was giving Sovereign Feng Yi face, and secondly, he could prevent him from truly having any connections with the heretic practitioner. Do you have any objections? Xiao Yi was silent for a moment before he cupped his fists and replied, I will obey the sect master's orders. Raising his head, his eyes, however, shifted to Zhu Yao at the back. In an instant, his eyes turned cold, and a hint of hatred flashed past. Zhu Yao's heart trembled. The hell? What's the meaning of his eyes? She was the one who saved his life, hey? Why was it that every time she saved him, she would pull his hatred? Zmo gave the order and announced the end of the meeting. It was a happy ending, and Zhu Yao was the only one who felt unwell. Feng Yi was the first to walk out. When she passed by Zhu Yao, she threw her a grateful gaze, and only then did Zhu Yao find some comfort. As expected, there were still sensible people in this world. Probably because she had saved Xiao Yi, the high mountain flower of ancient hill sect, Feng Yi had recently become even more friendly with her, because they were all on the beast-taming mountain, and they were very close to each other. Feng Yi would occasionally come down to chat with her, just when little Wimp had entered his rebellious phase, and she did not know what was wrong with old man Zmo, as he pushed all the responsibilities of ancient hill sect onto her shoulders. She was so busy that she almost fainted. Now that Feng Yi was here, she finally had an excuse and did not care anymore. When Feng Yi came looking for her, she was giving lessons to a few little radishes who had just entered the sect. Zmo's explanation was, these were the future of the sect, and as an elder, she had the responsibility of supervising them. Mama's egg, it's not like she was taking in disciples. Why the hell was she supervising them? Looking at a group of naive and fearless little radishes circling around you, and because of your reputation, you can't hit them, and you can't scold them. It's really terrifying, all right? Deity, what's your name? Number 1 radish. Deity, you can fly. Then, is your name Flying Man? Number 2 radish. But, my dad said that those who can fly are all called birds? Number 3 radish. Then, is your name Birdman? Number 4 radish. Zhu Yao squatted down and pulled the bunch of curious little radishes. Sighing, she explained with a heavy tone, Little friend, Deity's name is not Flying Man, nor Birdman. My name is Superman. That's right, I'm the Superman who saves the world. Oh! Exclamations of enlightenment resounded from the crowd. A light laughter came from afar. The tall mountain flower had come to chat with her. Zhu Yao finally found a reason to escape. She randomly pulled a disciple, handed over the bunch of little radishes, and then ran off while pulling Feng Yi. Children and whatnot, they were too terrifying. How can you deceive those children? Feng Yi sat on a stone chair in the courtyard. How can you say that I'm deceiving them? Zhu Yao poured a cup of tea for herself and explained with a stern look. I'm teaching them a very important lesson here. Those who speak too much are bound to slip up. Seriously. Feng Yi shook her head, however. She did not continue to refute. She took the tea from her hands and thanked her. Zhu Yao, it's not for you. All right. She did not have the face to snatch it back either. Hence, she had no choice but to pour herself another cup. Feng Yi seemed to have something to say, as she glanced at her a few times, and then hesitated. Zhang Yu? Ah? You. What do you think of me? Feng Yi suddenly asked. What do you mean? Zhu Yao was stunned for a moment. Feng Yi, however, lowered her head and secretly glanced at her from the corner of her eyes. As though she had something difficult to say out loud, her face began to redden inch by inch. Zhu Yao suddenly felt a little awkward. What's wrong with you? Why are you acting so weird today? After chatting for so many days, she had already completely treated the other party as her bosom friend. This was the first time she had seen such an expression. Are you willing to form a partner-practitioner relationship with me? Chapter 81. Before Zhu Yao could even take a sip of tea, she sprayed it all out. With his mouth wide open, he looked at Feng Yi, who still had a bashful look, and in an instant, his entire person felt unwell. Sister, don't scare me. You're not willing? Feng Yi's face instantly paled, and there seemed to be glistening tears flashing at the corner of her eyes. She took a step closer. Why? What's wrong with me? Zhu Yao was so frightened that she fiercely jumped and instantly fell down from the stone chair. Only after a long while did she crawl back up. Sigh. I think you misunderstood. What's so good about me? Why do you like me? Come on. Even though she had a male shell, she was a real woman, the straight kind. Feng Yi circled over and acted as though she was going to help her up. However, she replied firmly. Everything about you is fine. I'll change, all right? Zhu Yao took another huge step back and felt like crying. Big sis, don't play such an international joke with me, all right? Do you really hate me that much? Feng Yi's face was instantly filled with despair, and the tears at the corner of her eyes fell down in strings. Don't cry. Zhu Yao instantly felt a strong sense of guilt, and she instantly felt that she wasn't human anymore. That's not what I meant. We won't be happy together? Why? Feng Yi's face was filled with complaints, and she completely looked like a little woman who had sunk into her emotions. She no longer had the slightest bit of her cold and noble demeanor. Since you hate me so much, then why did you risk your life to save me so many times? Furthermore, you're always thinking for me? When did I think about you? She admitted that he had saved her before. But where did he think about her at every turn come from? You helped me save my disciple, and every time I came to you for something, you never refused or delayed it. That was because she wanted to slack off. Even sometimes when I come to look for you late at night, you listen to me patiently. Please. This was the basic conduct of a best friend. Every time her best friend broke up with her love in the modern world, she also liked to call her at 2 in the middle of the night. She did not strangle her. If you don't have me in your heart, why do you treat me like this? Stop. Zhu Yao took in a deep breath and stopped her from continuing to imagine. Sovereign, I really don't have any improper thoughts about you. Really. You have to believe me. I don't believe you. Feng Yi instantly shattered her hopes. He looked at her with a hurt expression. If not, we belong to the same sect. Why have you never called me martial uncle? Because I'm your junior sister. How could she say that? Why do you deny it? If you feel that the time is not right, I can wait. Feng Yi looked at her without any regrets. But, please don't push me away. You won't give me a reason today. I won't believe it. Reason. Damn it. Where was she going to find an excuse? She was a man now. Even if she took off her clothes for her to see, she probably wouldn't believe her. Actually, Zhu Yao took a deep breath and tried her best to squeeze out a very serious expression. I already have someone I like. Feng Yi trembled as she hurriedly took 2 steps back and looked at him with an ashen face. When his disciple rushed in, Yu Yin was currently meditating. He sensed his stupid disciple's aura from afar, and in the next instant, he pounced over like a raging bull. She laid in his arms and pretended to cry. Yu Yin stiffened for a moment as he hesitated on how to throw his disciple out so that she wouldn't fall so stupidly. Master, I don't want to live anymore. Zhu Yao rubbed her face randomly, attempting to wipe all of her tears and snot onto her master's white robe. She couldn't be the only one feeling conflicted, right? Woo. Earlier, I heard a pure young girl's heart. But I was really frightened. She actually wants me to marry her. No, she wants me to marry her. Just as Yu Yin was about to push her hand away, anger rose in his heart. Who is it, which, unafraid of death, came to snatch his disciple again? That's not important. Zhu Yao felt her head swelling. Say, I merely saved her once and treated her a little friendly. So how did she fall for me? I don't want to snatch someone else's harem. Although Xiaoyi had a lot of CPs, he did not mind losing one or two. Yu Yin frowned, guessing who the person his disciple was talking about was. He was considering if he should remind the other party not to have any ideas on his own disciple. Master, I really want to change back. My current identity is too fucked up. Only now did I realize that I can no longer see my future. Zhu Yao's snot and tears flowed down her face. If I'm with a girl, then I'm a lesbian. If I'm with a guy, then I'm a lesbian. It seems like I can't walk out of the gay circle no matter what. Yu Yin frowned. What kind of nonsense was this? Master, speak honestly. Zhu Yao fiercely rubbed her face. Zhu Yao fiercely rubbed her face. Do you also feel that my current appearance is especially abnormal and especially abnormal? Yu Yin glanced at her from head to toe. Her hair that looked like a chicken's nest, her eyes that were swollen like blisters, and her red nose that was constantly sniffing. No matter how he looked at her, she looked like a mess. Yet, without a blush on her face, he said, Not bad, master. As expected of a good Chinese master. So touching. Yu Yin, however, suddenly raised his head, looked outside, and said with a frown, The person you're talking about, is she? Zhu Yao was startled. Turning her head to look, she saw Feng Yi had unknowingly followed them over. Currently, she was standing outside, looking at the two people who were hugging each other with a look of disbelief. The person you like, could it be? A thought flashed in Zhu Yao's mind, and she instantly came up with a plan to eliminate all future troubles. She nodded heavily. That's right. In order to strengthen the effect, she even hugged onto her master's head and kissed him. The person beneath her instantly stiffened into a stone statue. Feng Yi looked as though she had received a huge blow, and her body swayed. She once again glanced at the two of them, and with sparkling little tears in her eyes, she flew away. Done. Zhu Yao silently gave a yes in her heart, and she actually felt a little sorry for Feng Yi. However, it was better to get the pain over with than to prolong it. Rather than letting the other party continue to have expectations, why not let her wake up as soon as possible? A person as prideful as Feng Yi, if she were to find a regular person, especially a girl, Zhu Yao would definitely not believe her. As the only demigod female practitioner in the cultivation world, naturally, there were no other female practitioners who could compare to her. If it was a man, it would be different, especially a man like her master, who was much stronger than her. Of course, this was all thanks to her master's cooperation. She turned around and gave Yu Yin a big hug. Thank you, master. Now that the matter is settled, I'll be leaving first. Love you. Only then did Zhu Yao return to Beast Taming Mountain. A certain person, however, still maintained that stiff posture and did not move for a long while. He subconsciously touched the corner of his lips, and that numb feeling momentarily caused him to be a little at a loss. Even his heart began to beat wildly. Just what was going on? Could it be that his disciple had cast some sort of unique mystic art on him? But his disciple was that stupid. How was that possible? If that was the case, then what kind of mystic art was that, to cause him to have such a strange feeling? And his mind was uncontrollably replaying the scene earlier, as though he was possessed by a demon. However, he did not hate it. He once again touched his lips, and a strange heat was faintly rising from the depths of his heart. Yu Yin recalled everything he had seen and heard in the past 10,000 years, yet he was still unable to find a reasonable answer. As expected, he had to ask his disciple. Ever since Feng Yi ran away from Jade Forest Mountain in tears that day, Zhu Yao had never seen her again. Zhu Yao reflected on herself for a moment, yet she still could not figure out where she had given her a hint, which made her feel that she had feelings for her. Although her current avatar was a man, she had always thought that other than when she was interacting with Wang Shuji and her master without any scruples, she did not treat other people any differently. After pondering for a moment, Zhu Yao was certain. Most probably, it was that time in the desolate lands. In order to heal her, he seemed to have stripped off her clothes. In her precognitive dreams, she seemed to have half-heartedly submitted to Xiaoyi because she was healing Xiaoyi's injuries as well. However, this time, it was her. The more Zhu Yao thought about it, the more she felt it was possible. It was no wonder she did not even hesitate for a moment back then, and gave her the water spirit so easily. So it was because of this reason. Big sis Zhu Yao, big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji reached out his hand and waved it in front of Zhu Yao. Ah, what's wrong with you? Did you hear what I said? This was already the third time her mind had wandered today. Did something happen? What did you say? Wang Shuji sighed, and then repeated himself. I said, the sect master's wife is pregnant. What? Who did it? Wang Shuji's face darkened. I'm sorry, it was a conditioned reflex. Zhu Yao scratched her head awkwardly. Really? I never expected that your master would still be so heroic at such a young age. Could the word heroic be used in such a manner? Wang Shuji shook his head. His face was filled with helplessness. Master told me personally. Most probably, not long from now, I will have a little junior martial brother or a little junior martial sister. Wang Shuji was really happy. Among the sect master's chamber disciples, he was the youngest. This time, he could finally be a senior martial brother again. And, the higher the cultivation of practitioners, the harder it was for them to have children. For a nascent soul stage practitioner like Old Man ZMO to be able to have children, it was practically harder than winning the lottery. When is she going to give birth? I want to join in the fun as well. It's still early. Wang Shuji said. It's not even 3 months yet. You have to wait until next year. She only needs to be pregnant for a year? Zhu Yao asked. Wang Shuji strangely glanced at her. Being pregnant for 10 months, that's the norm since ancient times. Sorry, she was Neza. She had thought that practitioners had long lifespans, so their pregnancy period would be long as well. Shuji, you didn't come looking for me today just to tell me about this, right? 2 days ago, she was still throwing a tantrum, but today, she looked as though nothing had happened. Wang Shuji's expression changed. A moment later, he silently pulled out a stack of books and passed them to her. The things you asked me to organize, I have already done them, so I came to send them over. Chapter 82. Good boy. Zhu Yao satisfyingly received it. When little Wimp wasn't rebellious, he was rather cute. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji hesitated to speak, but in the end, he still decided to speak up. I feel it's best if you don't get too close to Sovereign Feng Yi. After all, she's Xiaoyi's master. Xiao Yi, this person. Rest assured. Zhu Yao stroked his head. Even if you were to tie me up right now, I wouldn't dare to get too close to her. Both of them were so scary. She would rather not know them for the rest of her life. However, the metal spirit was still in Xiaoyi's hands, so she had no other choice. That's right, when she thought of the metal spirit, she suddenly remembered that she had to quickly release the wood spirit as well. She had released the water spirit, and the bug on Xiaoyi's face had already faded by so much. However, when she obtained the wood spirit back then, it was not like that. This proved that it was not as simple as snatching the 5 spirits from his hands. Instead, it was to ensure that no one else would make use of the 5 spirits. The wood spirit had been with her for a long time, and it was also very obedient. She was a little reluctant to part with it. In addition, the wood spirit wasn't like the water spirit. It had the entire ocean as its cover, while it was just a small sapling. Once it took root, it probably wouldn't be able to move anymore. Therefore, he had to find a safe place to place it where no one would find it. What place was there that humans couldn't discover, and that was suitable for a wood spirit to reside in? That's it. An idea flashed through her mind, and she immediately thought of a good place that no one would go to. Brat, I have something urgent to attend to. I'll be going out for a while. I can't talk to you anymore. Zhu Yao instructed, turned around and walked out. After pondering for a moment, she then turned around and instructed. All right, I'll leave the bunch of new brats in the front hall to you. I won't go there today. Big sis Zhu Yao. Before Wang Shuji could even stop her, her figure could no longer be seen. He sighed, resigned to his fate, turned around, and went to the front hall of the main peak. The place Zhu Yao wanted to go to was the Jade Forest Mountain, the place where the wood spirits were settled. She was unable to go there, and she still needed her master's help. Passing through the teleportation formation, they arrived at the peak of Jade Forest Mountain. He saw that familiar figure from afar. He pushed the door open and walked out. He seemed to be preparing to go out as well. Master. Zhu Yao waved her claws. I want to ask for your help. She didn't finish her sentence. Yu Yin had already walked over with a stern expression. Every step he took was especially firm, and he stopped a step away from her. He stared at her face without blinking. Zhu Yao swallowed back the words she was about to say. What happened to Master? Master, why are you? She didn't finish her sentence. Yu Yin suddenly grabbed onto her arm, lowered his head, and planted a kiss on her lips. For a moment, Zhu Yao felt as though she had heard some sort of explosion, as a bunch of garbled characters frantically flashed past her mind. His eyes widened. He looked at the person in front of him in disbelief. This person is definitely not my master. Yu Yin raised his head, furrowed his brows, and muttered to himself. Something's wrong. Why didn't he feel the same as before? Yes, one more time. Thus, he lowered his head again. He aimed at his disciple's mouth and smacked her again. Still not right. Again, thus, Baji, Baji, and Baji. Stop. Zhu Yao, who had finally regained her senses, pushed the person in front of her away. Forget about kissing her. What was the meaning of this? Her teeth were about to be knocked out, you know? Master, what are you doing? Your disciple sells her body, not her skills. Apui, what's wrong with you? Zhu Yao covered her injured mouth, and for the first time in her life, her face turned red. She glared at the man in front of her who was kissing her endlessly. What happened to her master? Was his body taken over? Was he abducted by aliens? Or was he infected with a kissing maniac disease? The hell? How can there be such a disease, hey? Looking at his disciple who suddenly ran a few meters away, Yu Yin was a little unhappy, however. He still replied with a serious look. I want to try? Try. Zhu Yao's mind was in a daze for a moment. Try what? Was he trying to see how strong her mouth was against pressure? I don't have that kind of feeling. What kind of feeling? Yu Yin still had a confused look as he seriously explained. Yesterday in the house, when you pressed your lips against mine. Yesterday? That time when he acted in front of Fengyi? Zhu Yao suddenly felt her heart tremble for a moment. Her master couldn't possibly be secretly in love with her, right? Ho-ho-ho. Ho-ho. Ho-ho. Zhu Yao felt a strange heat rising from her face, and it was even showing signs of spreading at an extremely fast speed. Why did she feel so embarrassed? This master of hers, who was an all-rounder, was actually secretly in love with her, and he didn't even seem to be aware of it. What should she do? Why did she suddenly feel that they could develop a relationship? No, no, no. She had to calm down. She still had to return home, return to her own world. She couldn't casually fall in love. However, even if she returned to the modern era, she would merely be an older, unmarried young woman. Then, why the hell would she return? But, after all, Zhu Yao's heart instantly began to ponder the question of whether she should stay or leave, as an intense debate arose. Wait a minute. Wasn't she thinking about the matter of her master secretly in love with her earlier? Looking at his disciple whose face was already as red as an apple, a certain master felt something stirring in the depths of his heart as he walked forward step by step. Zhu Yao simply felt that her heart had risen to her throat, and her heart was thumping non-stop. Yu Yin finally stopped in front of her, slowly lowered his head, and reached out his hand. Touching her forehead, his disciple wasn't sick, right? It's a little hot, but it's nothing serious. The pink bubbles that filled Zhu Yao's heart and eyes, with a pi sound, were completely extinguished. Ho-ho. She just knew that she had expectations for this one-track-minded master of hers. She was really out of her mind. Why are you looking for me? After confirming that the incident back then was just a coincidence, a certain master once again began to return to normal. Zhu Yao silently rolled her eyes. Her heart was filled with resentment, but she had nowhere to vent it out. Recalling the proper matters, she had no choice but to endure it for now. Master, you've been to the desolate lands before? Emin, Yu Yin nodded. Those few purple lightning bolts were captured there. That place was extremely unique. Although the air did not contain any 5 elemental spiritual energy, there was the purple extreme heavenly lightning, which carried a powerful lightning spiritual energy. I wish to plant the wood spirit in the desolate lands. Yu Yin looked at her a little strangely, as though he did not understand why she wanted to do this. Zhu Yao had no choice but to tell him about Xiao Yi's changes. Only then did Yu Yin nod. Your thoughts are correct. The desolate lands is indeed the best place to hide the wood spirit. However, Zhu Yao turned around. Could it be that there was still something she had not considered? Have you ever thought that the desolate lands is a land of death, while the wood spirit represents life? Yu Yin said, if my guess is correct, if you plant the wood spirit in the desolate lands, in just 10,000 years, the desolate lands will no longer be the desolate lands, but an oasis. Isn't that great? Zhu Yao smiled. Only when she truly arrived at that place did she realize how terrifying that place was. There was no spiritual energy, no life, only desolation. If she could bring life to that place, it would be a good thing. But if that's the case, 10,000 years later, the desolate lands will most likely become the next Tasioluk. People will no longer be afraid of that world, and the wood spirit will eventually be discovered. Then let the next savior save it. Zhu Yao smiled. She could only help up to this point. When that time comes, the wood spirit can be considered to have saved that world. I hope that the demonic beasts of the desolate lands will know gratitude and protect the wood spirit from being stolen by outsiders. Yu Yin glanced at her, and his expression sank. She clearly knew that there was another method, and that was to completely destroy the wood spirit. It was formed from spiritual energy in the first place. Even if it died, it would simply turn back into spiritual energy. As long as it was given time, it could still turn into a spirit. However, his disciple would rather spend so much effort than to use this method. She probably couldn't bear it. Yu Yin took a deep breath. Deity practitioners, after living for a long time, had long gotten used to ignoring life. However, only this stupid disciple of his still maintained her original heart. Towards the wood spirit, it was the same towards others as well. She said that the reason why she came to this world was because Xiao Yi had disrupted the balance. However, she clearly had hundreds and thousands of chances to kill Xiao Yi, and the hidden danger would naturally be eliminated. Even now, if she were to ask for his help, he would not even frown, and he would be able to help her eliminate this person. However, she did not, and had never thought of using this method. Her life was most likely her bottom line, right? Zhu Yao released the wood spirit, though it seemed to be very unwilling to leave her, as it stretched out its soft little vines to wrap around her legs, not allowing her to leave. After staying in her divine sense for a long time, it faintly showed signs of taking root, so naturally, it was not too willing to move. Though Zhu Yao was a little unwilling as well, the longer she kept it, the harder it would be for her to let it go. Hardening her heart, she promised it that she would visit it often in the future, and then left. Only demigod stage practitioners could enter the desolate lands. Even if a normal person accidentally entered, the groups of 10th-ranked demonic beasts inside were not to be trifled with. However, this way, she could only wait until she became a demigod before she could visit the little wood spirit. When she returned, it was already late at night. She had escaped back, and currently, she was basically unable to look straight at her master's face. Recalling what happened in the day, she instantly felt as though she was being teased, and the person in question even had a face of ignorance, causing her to be extremely anxious. Big sis Zhu Yao. Just as she reached the entrance, Wang Shuji walked out. Little wimp. Zhu Yao was shocked. Why are you still here? You left before you even finished speaking. I was worried. Wang Shuji frowned. Did something happen? Zhu Yao's face reddened, and she firmly shook her head. Even if she was beaten to death, she would never tell anyone that she was forcefully kissed. I'm fine. Cuckoo, you should go back and rest first. Oh, Only then did Wang Shuji turn around and leave. He turned to look at Zhu Yao's bad expression. Was she really fine? Of course, Zhu Yao wasn't fine. Her entire person wasn't feeling good, all right? Clearly, she was the one who was secretly loved, so why was she feeling so conflicted? No, she had to find a chance to get back at him. Chapter 83. After releasing the wood spirit, Zhu Yao lived a few peaceful days. Zhu Yao did not know if Xiao Yi's bug attribute had weakened because he had gone into closed-door training, and he had declared that he would not come out until he reached the middle stages of nascent soul. The sect master had only requested for him to not leave Ancient Hill Sect for 200 years, yet he had locked himself in isolation. He had just formed his nascent soul not too long ago, and if he wanted to reach the middle stages of nascent soul, he would need at least 500 years before he could come out of isolation. The master and disciple both concentrated on staying at the peak. It seemed like not only did Xiao Yi know how to pick up girls, he still had some brains. He knew how to keep a low profile and keep a low profile. At least on the surface, he and Rueyu had really broken off cleanly. This also earned him a good reputation in the sect. However, not contacting Rueyu did not mean that he would not contact other girls. Every day, Zhu Yao would be able to see waves after waves of girls. Every day, they would come up with new ways to deliver various types of spiritual herbs and pellets to the mountain peak. Zhu Yao shook her head. She really couldn't understand what these girls were thinking in their hearts. Even idol chasing wasn't this crazy, all right? I really don't know what they are after. Sighing deeply, he shook his head and looked at the peak of the mountain. Suddenly, an evil idea popped up in his mind. It will definitely be very lively. Zhu Yao made a decision in her heart, but she lacked a helper. Hence, she eagerly ran to look for Zidan. He was definitely the best helper. As expected, Zidan's eyes shone as well. That's great. Why don't we go look for Senior Martial Brother Sect Master right now? Just as the two of them were planning to leave, Sect Master ZMO had already come looking for them. Recently, the sect leader was in a good mood. Perhaps it was because he was in high spirits because of happy events. He had been cultivating to the nascent soul realm for almost 1,000 years, but suddenly, he had a successor. His wife was pregnant. Naturally, ZMO was extremely happy. Whenever a person was happy, he would easily go crazy. Therefore, he stopped doing his proper business and became less involved. Whenever he had nothing to do, he would wander around the various peaks and ask anyone he met, "Are you a dual cultivator? Did he have a partner? Do you have children?" "Hehe, I have it." ZMO smiled like a chrysanthemum. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Someone who was about to become a father. Were they all so crazy? Senior brother. Zidan sighed. This is already the third time you've asked me this question. Oh, did I ask? ZMO stroked his shining white beard. Ha, Junior Martial Brother, don't blame me. You know that I'm about to become a father soon, and I have too many things to do. One or two things are bound to be forgotten. You have so many things to do. How do you still have time to stroll around here? Zhu Yao silently retorted. Suddenly, she recalled the pile of miscellaneous tasks he had given her. He couldn't have pushed all of them to her, right? Congratulations, you're going to be a father. Zhu Yao retaliated a little. However, ZMO did not understand at all. He even cheerfully apologized. Thank you, Junior Martial Brother Jiang. Don't worry, you also have a chance. Looks like you won't have a chance. Zhu Yao. What do you mean? Oh, right. Looking at your anxious faces, where are you going? ZMO asked. Only then did Zidan recall the matter at hand, and once again told ZMO about his thoughts. After hearing that, ZMO nodded. This method can solve the problem once and for all, but are you sure this is true? You don't have to worry about this, senior brother. Zidan patted his fat and guaranteed. I saw what happened on Taming Beast Peak with my own eyes. Amen. Only then did ZMO nod. Then it's decided. Tomorrow, I will mention this matter to Senior Martial Aunt. However, I will have to trouble Junior Martial Brother to personally make a trip. Naturally, Zidan would not reject. Early in the morning of the second day, after making sufficient preparations, he ascended to the peak of Taming Beast Peak. Although ZMO had been neglecting his duties for the past few days, he was still reliable in handling matters. When Zhu Yao arrived, the hall was already filled with mountain lords and elders. As for old man ZMO, with a chrysanthemum-like smile, he persistently explained the ways of raising children to the people present. Just when everyone's ears had grown calluses from listening to him, Zidan returned with a strange expression. How was it? ZMO stepped forward and asked. Zhu Yao could not help but feel a little nervous as well. She couldn't have been rejected, right? Senior Marshal Aunt Feng Yi agreed. Zidan said. Zhu Yao heaved a sigh of relief. He actually agreed. Why are you frowning for? Since that's the case, then this matter is decided. ZMO turned to look at Hong Cho at the back. Junior Marshal Sister Hong Cho, when do you think we should settle this matter? This can be considered a joyous occasion. I will inform Ling Long to prepare when I return. Hong Cho smiled. Good, good, good. ZMO stroked his beard, and his face was filled with wrinkles from his smile. Lowering his head, he calculated. Coincidentally, there's an extremely good day 5 months later. Why don't we hold Junior Marshal Brother Zhao's Pyromicron Sigma Tau Iota Kappa ritual at that time? Hong Cho nodded. I will listen to Senior Marshal Brother Sect Master's arrangements. That's right. The idea that Zhu Yao thought of was to have Xiaoyi marry Ling Long. Although she knew he was a stud, he always thought of picking up girls, so she had to take responsibility. Ling Long could be considered to have followed him since young, and was his earliest woman. However, in her dreams, this Ling Long was infatuated with him. However, other than in the beginning, when he sent Ling Long into the Medicine Mountain's inner sect, later on, he did not bring her along to ascend. Even the scenes of her appearing by his side were very few, as though he had forgotten about her existence, simply because she was a tri-spirit veins holder and could not keep up with his cheat's pace. Zhu Yao had considered for a moment before deciding on this candidate. There were so many girls around, and he still wanted to leave after wiping his butt clean. How could it be that simple? When one owed too much, they had to return it eventually. In the cultivation world, there could only be one dual practitioner companion, and unless one died or ascended, they could not be separated. Furthermore, dual practitioner arts were beneficial to one's cultivation, and it could be said that they were improving at the same time. If, after having a companion, he still had a relationship with another woman, then he would be looked down upon by the world. If he was not careful, he might even be mistaken as a heretic practitioner who cultivated and absorbed other people's cultivation. She just did not know how the other women would react if they knew that Xiaoyi was going to take dual practitioner companions. She had a feeling that a huge battle was about to unfold, especially that demigod stage Rueyu. Just thinking about it made her a little excited. Yet, Xiaoyi could not reject it, because this matter was agreed to by his master. Furthermore, he still had feelings for Ling Long, so he basically could not find an excuse to reject it. Little brother, do you have a grudge with Senior Marshal Aunt Feng Yi? Zidan suddenly popped out. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment. Zidan continued. When I went to propose, Senior Marshal Aunt Feng Yi was initially very happy. However, the moment I said it was Xiao Yi, her face sank. She even asked me why you weren't the one who went to propose. Cuckoo. Cuckoo. Zhu Yao choked on her tea and coughed till her face and neck were red. Little brother? Most probably, Sovereign has some misunderstanding towards me. Ho ho. Mommy, Feng Yi couldn't possibly be so happy because she thought he was the one who proposed marriage to her, right? No way. It's best if I hide further away in the future and not be discovered by her. It would be terrible if he did not get to see Xiao Yi's good show, and instead, Feng Yi's love turned into hatred. The news of Xiao Yi marrying a disciple of the Medicine Mountain, Ling Long, quickly spread in Ancient Hill Sect. As Zhu Yao had expected, Xiao Yi did not express any objections, but he was not too enthusiastic either. There were still 5 months before the wedding. He used closed-door training as an excuse, and most of the matters were arranged by the Medicine Mountain. However, Zhu Yao was still unable to witness their wedding, because the sect master's wife was about to give birth. She was dragged to the Sword Mountain by Wang Shuji early in the morning, and as they walked, he excitedly told her this piece of news. Although Zhu Yao was extremely resentful towards Zmo for pushing a pile of matters onto her, she was still rather happy for him since he had a successor. Zmo was the sect master, and adding that he had good relations with others, seemingly the moment he heard the news of his wife giving birth, all the nascent soul practitioners in the sect swarmed to the main mountain. When Zhu Yao arrived at the small house in the side hall, she was shocked by the densely packed people inside. Some of them were sitting, some were standing, and only old man Zmo was walking back and forth in the middle of the house, looking especially conspicuous. After a while, he casually pulled someone over and asked, "Will my wife be fine? Wasn't she supposed to be pregnant for 10 months? Why is it brought forward by a month? Just how long do we have to wait? Can't we go in and take a look now? Why isn't there any sound at all? I could still hear it earlier. Do you think she's giving birth to a boy or a girl? Will there be any danger? Can I go and help? Will nothing happen?" The face of the person who was grabbed darkened. Senior Marshal brother, sister-in-law is, after all, a nascent soul practitioner. She will be fine. Also, if you use any more strength, something is going to happen to my hand. Only then did Zmo let go of his hand and continued to walk around the house. After going back and forth a few dozen times, he once again asked what he said earlier. So this old man still had the potential to be a chatterbox. Zhu Yao was speechless and hurriedly found a place to sit. To prevent herself from being grabbed by the overly anxious Zmo, Zhu Yao had always felt that a woman giving birth to a child was a very sacred, yet a little cruel matter. After all, as a mother, she had to experience that kind of pain. However, the miraculous thing was, there was not the slightest bit of movement in the house. However, after pondering for a moment, she understood. After all, he was a nascent soul practitioner. If he were to experience the pain of dying like a mortal, that would be too embarrassing. Most probably, he had a special method to allow the child to be born safely. After all, she had never heard of any practitioner who had a child dying from a difficult birth. After sitting in the house for less than an hour, the cries of a child could finally be heard from the house. Among the quietly waiting crowd, the cries seemed especially loud and clear. Everyone's faces revealed smiles as they congratulated Zmo one after another. Old man Zmo was smiling to the point where he could not even close his mouth. A moment later, the door opened, and the person who came out was the sect master's wife. She was even carrying a baby in her hands. The crowd once again congratulated her, and Zhu Yao curiously moved closer to look at the child as well. It was finally born. She wondered if it was a male bug or a female bug. Zhu Yao, who clearly saw the baby's face. Why the hell is it a bug? Zhu Yao looked at the 3 gray letters imprinted on the little lump's face, and in an instant, she even had the thought of dying. The smile that she had put on earlier was still frozen on her face. Zhu Yao was so irritated that she wanted to flip the table, and she was already cursing in her heart. Wasn't it said that only Shaoyi was a bug? Why was a child who had just been born a bug as well? Can someone explain this? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.